or toxic masculinity. Karl writes, the creation of the imperialist world order involves a global differentiation of gender patterns or inserts a global dimension to their definition. Frontier trade, conquest, or settlement, exalted forms of masculinity different from those becoming dominant in the core countries. So is the formula of normalization, the white woman's arrival to raise families. As Australian history of women's work in the colonies is called gentle invaders, and the point is well made. The expansion of the white settlement involves a dialectic of masculinities and femininities, as well as race and class. The women were invading white men's realms, as well as the women's blacks. In the 1830s, the domestication of American slavery marked a decisive shift from the previous century's idea of the natural slave unfit for liberty to the slave as the undeveloped savage in need of civilization and improvement. G.W.S. Hegel's commentary on the Negro in Africa actually serves as a grounding of the ethnology used in America regarding enslaved Africans. Hegel writes, in Negro life, the characteristic point is the fact that consciousness has not yet attained to the realization of any substantial objective existence, as, for example, God or law, in which the interest of man's volition is involved, in which he realizes his own being, end quote. Hegel believed that Africans had no notion of the other or a higher power outside of their own existence. He thereby concludes that the Negro exhibits the natural man in its completely wild and untamed state. Because the slave was thought to have no knowledge of his selfhood or the human soul, the Negro was thought to be completely sensual. For this race, quote, human flesh is but an object of sense, mere flesh. It holds no meaning beyond its perception. The sensual, savage Negro was trapped in the natural condition of being, a stage of, quote, absolute and thorough injustice. The Negro was thought to have no spiritual or reflective consciousness of his existence. So slavery was a means of developing the Negro. Hegel is adamant that, quote, slavery is itself a phase of advance from the merely isolated sensual existence, a phase of education, a mode of becoming participant in a higher morality and culture connected to it. While Hegel believed that, quote, slavery is in and for itself injustice, for the essence of humanity is freedom, the Negro is the exception. For this man must be mature. Anyway. Hegel's depiction of the Negro was not the rambling of a simple racist posing as a philosopher. We'll find in most philosophers racist. Hegel's lectures on the philosophy of world history spanned the years of 1822 to 1831 and reflected the most authoritative ethnological thinking of the 19th century. These lectures overlapped Hegel's revisions to his Encyclopedia of Philosophical Sciences and conveyed what was considered the world's most advanced thinking as to the nature of the African. The description of the African as sensuous and not beyond the raw state of nature was not isolated to the colonial apologetics of Europeans. In the United States, the sensual nature of the Negro was used to justify the modernization of the American slave institution. Thomas Jefferson expressed a similar view in 1779 in his Notes on Virginia, saying of the Negro, in general, their existence appears to participate more of sensation than reflection. To this must be ascribed their disposition to sleep when abstracted from their diversions and unemployed in labor. An animal whose body is at rest, who does not reflect, must be disposed to sleep. Anyway. Although Jefferson's statement was made in the second half of the 18th century, George Stroud's sketch of the law relating to slavery in 1856 showed that Jefferson's idea of the Negro was widely cited in support of American slavery within numerous states in the 19th century. The sensual nature of the slave, his lack of reflective capacity, required both order and education for his improvement. To remedy those defects in Negro character, American slavery underwent an evolution. As the historian Willie Lee Rose explains, quote, in the 19th century, the phrase domestic institution came to mean slavery idealized. Slavery translated into a fundamental and idealized Victorian institution, or the family. The domestication of slavery was not simply political. It introduced philosophical architecture and order of man on the backs of enslaved African peoples. As Rose continues, Pro-slavery philosophers intended to suggest a benign institution that encouraged between masters and slaves the quality so much admired in the Victorian family: cheerful obedience and gratitude on the part of children-reared slaves, and a paternalistic vision, wisdom, protection, and discipline on the part of the father-reared master. Whereas the 18th century justifications for slavery rested on the confinement of the African to the realm of non-human, 19th century laws restricting chattel's movement and eliminating their education indicate blacks were categorized as a special and different kind of humanity, as lesser humans, and a dependency assumed to be perpetual. In earlier, harsher times, they had been seen as luckless, unfortunate barbarians. Now, they were to be treated as children, expected never to grow up. As a noted ethnologist, John H. Van Every and pro-slavers propagandists explained, quote, "The great foundational principle, the subordination or slavery of this Negro element is universal, and for 200 years and upwards unquestioned in a single instance on this continent or indeed any other, for like the relations of the sexes of parents and children, slavery was inherent, pre-existing, and sprung spontaneously from the necessities of human society. The white man was superior, the Negro was inferior, and in juxtaposition, society could only exist and can only exist by placing them in natural relation to each other, or by the social subordination or so-called slavery of the Negro." End quote. The Negro's moral cultivation depended on the advances of the white civilization according to 19th century knowledge. Slavery was merely an expression of the universal racial order, which was not only based on scientific theories of racial inferiority, but also the belief that the organization of the state and broader society should be modeled upon the patriarchal ordering of the family. The order of American slavery, established on the domestic realm of the family, was thought to be the foundation of America as a nation and, as illustrated shortly, as an empire. As C.G. Meminger noted in 1851, in the Hebrew polity, we have the family as the basis and origin of all government. The individual is only known as one of a family. His duties and rights are measured by his position there. If he is the father, he commands. If he is the son, he obeys. In the one case, he provides and gives. In the other, he takes and receives. Inequality and dependence prevail throughout. All benefit or all suffer from the good or evil of each. A few moments' reflection will show that Southern society, in common with that of the most stable governments known to history, rests upon the family or the Hebrew basis. The slave institution at the South increases the tendency to dignify the family. Each planter is in fact a patriarch. His position compels him to be a ruler of his household. From early youth, his children and servants look up to him as head, and obedience and subordination become important elements of education. Where so many depend upon one will, society necessarily assumes the Hebrew form. Domestic relations become those which are most prized. Each family recognizes its duty, and its members feel the responsibility for its discipline. The fifth commandment becomes the foundation of society. The state is looked to only as the ultimate head in external relations, while all internal duties, such as support, education, and the relative duties of individuals, are left to domestic regulation. In our post-structural moment, patriarchy would seem obvious to resonate with Meminger's account. Right? There's a white male father who orders and controls enslaved Africans who are thought to be children. And this is the basis of both government and nation. The intuitive ahistorical critical reaction, however, is far too deterministic to be useful in our attempts to grasp the reality of Meminger's claim. The domestication of slavery was not solely determined by white male power. The institution itself gave rise to different spheres of influence. Africans needed to not only be controlled, but also to be improved and educated. The white father enforced law and order, but it is the white imperial mother who dictated societal morality and education. These modalities introduced patriarchy as the platform from which the civilizing power of the white woman was displayed. This account offers a much-needed complexity to the presumed asymmetrical relations between white men and women and the enslaved. Beyond mere politics or identity, the position of whites within slavery were indicative of established orders being endemic to the institution. Enslaved Africans were oppressed by both white men and white women, so different qualities were thought to be advanced by their servitude to each. Contrary to the presumed passivity of the white woman, where her day-to-day abuse of slaves is denied and thought to have been violence committed only by white men, the white woman was charged with the managing and punishing of slaves as she saw fit. While the home was certainly ordered towards patriarchy, in which white men, quote, expected to be obeyed by women, children, and slaves, the white woman, quote, showed unusual power within that domain. Because she reared children, the white woman was thought to, quote, set the standards for behavior. In the South, this power was over the moral realm, motivated white womanhood to differentiate itself from manhood. It was an ideal she sought diligently to live up to in these prescriptions. As an English visitor once remarked concerning the order of a slave owner's North Carolina home, quote, the legislative and executive powers of the house belong to the mistress. The master has nothing to do with administration. He is a monument of uxoriousness and passive endurance, end quote. The power of the administration of white women, the power of administration was the white woman's primary relationship to the slave. As the historian Anne Scott writes, quote, the mistress had to dispense justice, settle small personal feuds, and cajole those who did not want to work. Despite her erasure, the Southern white woman's work was to extend the order of the home beyond its physical architecture into the world. The plantation was just the frontier that it most immediately bordered. In 1853, Horace Mann, the famous anti-slave education reformer, wrote that the charge of women is the empire of the home, the most important of all empires and the parent of all empires and emperors. The academic construct of woman is ontologically set against that of man, and by effect, the maladies such as racism, empire, imperialism, and nationalism are thought to originate only and solely from masculinity. Theorists assert this a priori opposition as an analogous rationale to assert that the rise of women, her rights, writings, and criticism of society throughout the mid-1800s was, in fact, set against patriarchy. The historical record shows that feminism encouraged rather than opposed white male rule. As historian Mary P. Ryan argues, quote, the 1850s saw two icons, the isolated home and the imperial mother, installed at the center of popular discourse. On the one hand, the idea of women's moral superiority, inherent in her characterization as pure, loving, and protected from the temptations of the world, was thought to define the home, which was isolated from the industrial and violent white male world of politics, and served as the foundation for feminism. On the other, the moral power of women was transported in one great mythical leap from the fireside circle to the vast expanses of national life, from family to society, from isolated home to mother's empire. Conceptually, imperial isolation is a contradiction of terms, but it formed the sociological basis of both the political isolation and the political power the white woman was given through the 1800s. Now, what's important to understand here is that our traditional conceptualization of not only white womanhood during the 19th century, but also the home is one of subjugation and subordination. We imagine the home to be isolated from society, such that it was oppressive that women did not participate in society. But what we come to find out is that the home was the foundation and model by which the architecture of empire was transported to other nations. So rather than white women being simply cut off from their social roles in society and isolated and oppressed within the home, they were actually empowered because they served as the moral and ideological basis that gave currency to the idea that white people sought to exploit and impose on other national groups. The literary scholar Ann Kaplan's article, Manifest Domesticity, is critical of Ryan's inability to see how the rise of white motherhood within the isolated home was used as a metric to establish the barbarism of foreign, alien, racialized people and justify colonialism. Kaplan claims that Ryan's Empire of the Mother, quote, employs empire as a metaphor framing her analysis, yet she never links this pervasive imperial metaphor to the contemporaneous geopolitical movement of imperial expansion or to the discourse of manifest destiny. Kaplan maintains that Ryan's blind spot stems from the way that the ideology of separate spheres, right, the public and the private, has shaped scholarship. Until recently, it had been assumed that nationalism and foreign policy lay outside the concern and participation of women. The term domestic has a double meaning that not only links the familial household to the nation, but also imagines both in opposition to everything outside the geographic and conceptual border of the home. So in this world, the home is the border of the frontier. It establishes the basis of the other. So white anthropology then, the white mother, her empire, begins in the home, but takes that which is outside the home as the racialized other, the uncivilized world that needs modernization and improvement. This historical inclination of patriarchy towards territorial expansion and manifest destiny has also been well documented by Amy Greensberg, but for her, it was primarily male-dominant. Masculinity is not so as favor that implicates womanhood. So while Greensberg showed that Western expansion proved that domesticity and manifest destiny could be mutually reinforcing, and that womanhood is imagined to be culpable only for erroneously believing in the ideas of imperialism, not acting on them, she does not understand the basis by which white womanhood took the lead in expanding American imperialism and the colonial state itself. This is important because this is the frame and ideological and intellectual history from which white feminism begins taking up the mantle of women's rights in the 1850s or 1860s. So those who can be colonized. Ethnology is the foundation of black sensuality and the black male race. The chain of being established on the white family was not isolated to the political economy of 19th century American slavery. It was, in fact, scientific and the cornerstone of modern ethnology. And I want you to understand that when you're taught the idea of the myth of the black rapist, you're taught it as a stereotype, as something that existed because of the fear and the phobias that constructed black men's rape. That theory is incorrect. Black men were thought to evolve into rapists upon freedom. In other words, it was a scientific fact. The American Ethnological Society was founded in 1842, only months apart from the Ethnological Societies of London. But modern ethnology, whose approach had the benefit of Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species after 1859, is distinguished from these earlier incarnations in its use of evolution to explain the divergences of races. A.K. King's Ethnology, Fundamental Ethnical Problems, the Primary Ethnical Groups, claims that ethnology proceeded through a comparative method of racial groups to determine, quote, the absolute and relative value of racial criteria, miscegenation, the origin and evolution of articulate speech, and its value as a test of a race, the influence of the environment on the evolution of human varieties, on their pursuits, temperaments, religious views, grades of culture, the evolution of the family, the clan, tribe, and nation. The 19th century psychologist, historian, and philosopher William Diffley, who also held, ironically, Hegel's Chair of Philosophy at the University of Berlin, these racist naming things that have changed, wrote that, quote, ethnology describes the natural articulation of the human race and the resulting distribution of human life over the face of the earth in light of its physical characteristics. This ethnology thus investigates how the human race, on the basis of family ties and kinship, is naturally grouped in concentric spheres measured by degree of kinship, i.e. how each narrow sphere, along with closer ties, new common characteristics appear. Because ethnology focused on the relations races shared, racial contact was explained within white gender hierarchies ordered to a familial hierarchy led by the patriarch. This is immensely important. Arthur de Gobineau's The Inequality of Races in 1854 is an instructive example of this hierarchy in practice. While his text is often considered one of the most illustrious racist political texts of the 19th century, as it's talking about the inferiority of the black race, it is useful to remember that it appeared during the same decade as the discourse of imperial domesticity and reflected the order imposed on the African as savage but childlike and feminine. Gobineau believed that, quote, every human activity, moral or intellectual, had its origin source in one or the other of these two currents, male or female. And only the races which have one of these elements in abundance, without, of course, being quite destitute of the other, can reach in their social life a satisfactory stage of culture and so attain to civilization. Civilization is founded on the masculine or feminine principle operating to build a republic. So Gobineau insisted that, quote, institutions invented and molded by a race of men make the race what it is. They are effects, not causes. So unlike our 21st century theories of social constructionism, Gobineau held that the creations of our society emanate from the inner personality and substance of the races who actually colonized and built them. He says, quote, the male nations look principally for material well-being. The female nations are more taken up with the needs of imagination. The superiority of the German stock is birthed from the generational accumulation of the blood of male races. You love toots, right? While degenerate European races of the South are more accepting of feminine blood. This is the foundation from which philosophy and poetry, language, and literature grow. The mark of a race's male or female principle is so remarkable that Gobineau actually argues, quote, if a degraded people, he's talking about black people, at the lowest rung of the racial ladder, with as little significance for the male as for the female progress of mankind, could possibly have invented a language of philosophical depth, of aesthetic beauty and flexibility, rich in characteristic form and precise idioms, fitted alike to express the sublimities of religion, the graces of poetry, the acres of physical and political science. Such a people would certainly possess an utterly useless talent, that of inventing and perfecting an instrument which their mental capacity would be too weak to turn to any account. End quote. Following the ethnological order that establishes the African as ungendered, right? Because they're the lowest rung of the racial ladder, they have not evolved genders as masculine yet. Gounod made the lack of civilization synonymous with the temperament of the race. Because savage races lack the distinction of gender, Africans could not appreciate the creations that are birthed from the gender temperaments of the masculine and feminine, such as God, truth, and poetry. Like the concomitant logic of the patriarchal home, the patriarchal race was ordered such that white men and women could civilize and improve the savage races. As Jules Michelet writes, Africa is woman, her races are feminine. The designation of a race as feminine was not to suggest that the feminine race was, in fact, gendered, but that the feminine race held an inferior relation to the patriarchal Anglo-Saxon race and possessed a sensual constitution. They were feminine because they were to be ruled by the masculine race, which comprised both white men and white women. Ethnological theory created a stark divide between the black race and the white race. Because all black people were of feminine or savage races, black men and women could not partake in the same genders of a dominant masculine race. The 19th century ideas of race and gender, if such a term can even apply to Africans, were the result of complete differences in the kinds of evolutionary species between racial groups. Evolution meant that every race would have different gendered kinds within its group if it developed to actually grasp civilization. Non-white savage primitive groups were denied altogether the specific race-gender distinctions that white had because such distinctions were specific to or the exclusive mark of the civilized white races. In this sense, there were no categories universals that captured the shared historical experiences between these groups. Commenting on 19th century sexual delineations within racial taxonomies, Imperial Leather, Race, Gender, and Sexuality in the Colonial Context, Anne McClintock argues, quote, and listen to this is important. Racial stigmata were systematically, if often contradictorily, drawn on elaborate minute shades of difference in which social hierarchy of race, class, and gender overlapped each other in a three-dimensional graph of comparison. The rhetoric of race was used to invent distinctions between what we would now call classes. At the same time, the rhetoric of gender was used to make increasingly refined distinctions amongst different races. The white race was figured as the male of the species, and the black race as the female. Similarly, the rhetoric of class was used to describe minute and subtle distinctions between other races. The Zulu male was regarded as the gentleman of the black race, but was seen to display features typical of females of the white race. So when you study 19th century ethnology, there is no mapping on of race and gender cleanly onto the bodies that we presuppose possess them today. In other words, there were no masculine men in the 19th century because the savage man who pretended to be masculine was merely the most evolved form of a childlike feminine species. While this may seem contradictory to our 21st century ideas because we don't read history, it is crucial to understand the differences between 19th century ethnology and the schemas of our present day. According to the European ethnologies that served as the basis of 19th century accounts of race, gender simply did not exist within the Negro race. Why? Because they had not evolved it yet. They were savage, which meant there were no distinctions between them. Blacks were primitive, and as such had not yet evolved to the level of civilization necessary to warrant the distinctions between men and women. As purely sensual beings, they had no reflective sensibilities that could grasp the purpose of gender, which was to ground civilization, much less the morality of femininity and the burdens of masculinity according to 19th century racial sciences. Ethnological science had a peculiar effect on the studies of black males. Consistent with McClintock's historical schema, 19th century ethnologists categorized the Negro male as the racial instantiation of what was known in the white race as the female. For example, Franz I. Pruner Bay suggested that black man is to the white man what woman is to man in general, a loving being and being of pleasure. While Carl Vaux held that, quote, the grown-up Negro partakes, as regards his intellectual faculties, of the nature of the female child and the senile white. He manifests a propensity for pleasure, music, dancing, physical enjoyments, and conversations, while his inconstancy of impressions and of all the feelings are those of a child. Despite the alleged lack of reflective capacity in the notable feminine character of black males, ethnologists interpret the sensuality of the black male as uncontrollable, insatiable, and dangerous. In other words, the supposed childlike mentality of black males did not stop ethnologists from developing scientific theories that inevitably would claim that black males were biologically predisposed to rape. During the United States Civil War, and this just tells you, I really want you to understand what racism did, right, in constructing black males. Black male savageness and pre-rationality was so solidified within the mind of 19th century ethnologists that black soldiers were studied in the nude to ascertain their masculine attributes. As the historian Melissa Stein explains, quote, secondary sex characteristics like body and facial hair were of keen interest to white scientists during and after the Civil War. Van Avery explained, quote, and I'm not making this up, so I'm saying again, quote, the intellectual, the mental strength, the moral beauty, all the qualities of the inner being, as well as those outward attributes tangible to the sense, harmonize perfectly with the growth of the beard. And when that has reached its full development, is both the signal and proof of mature manhood. Van Avery claimed that the Caucasian was the only bearded race, and the male beard, quote, symbolizes our highest conception of manhood. It is the outward evidence of mature development, of complete growth, mental as well as physical, of strength, wisdom, and manly grace. Because the Negro male had very little facial hair, except for a tuft on the chin and sometimes the upper lip. You know, growing our beards is very difficult with our hair. He did not exhibit the physiological characteristics of manhood, and by effect was disqualified from social manhood rights and citizenship. The Union was so firmly, it gets better. The Union was so firmly committed to these markers of manhood that in 1863, it commissioned the Sanitary Commission to measure, quote, the most important physical dimensions and personal characteristics of the diverse male bodies to whom their work was afforded access. Physicians were to, quote, observe the colored troops when unclothed and record their pilosity, or their scale, the amount of hair they had on their bodies, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 representing the maximum which had ever been seen or should see in a white man. After the Civil War, I promise you this better. After the Civil War, but see, this tells you the intellectual background behind how racism distorted even what we take to be our categories today. So we walk around talking about race, class, and gender without a very appropriate understanding of how those concepts actually apply to the male bodies that are usually condemned by the ideas of masculinity, or toxic masculinity, which we've made synonymous to patriarchy. So after the Civil War, the ethnological theories arguing for the natural defect in black males proliferated. At the end of slavery, many scientists argued that the black male's innate inclination to rape was free. And sex, so first we're children, right? Then we're women. You free us from slavery, now we're rapists. So as sexologist G. Franklin Loyston claimed, this is another quote because I can't make this stuff up. When all inhibitions of a high order have been removed by sexual excitement, I fail to see any difference from a physical standpoint between the sexual furor of the Negro and that which prevails amongst the lower animals in certain instances in a certain period. James Kernan, in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases in 1885, called attention to the fact, which is very pertinent to our present inquiry, namely, that the furor sexualis in the Negro resembles similar sexual attacks in the bull and elephant, and the running amok of the Malay race. This furor sexualis has been especially frequent among the Negroes in states cursed by carpetbag statesmanship, in which frequent changes in the social and commercial status of the Negro race have occurred. So while enslaved, the Negro was subjugated by the law and the punishment of the whip. According to the Texas physician F.E. Dane, during slavery, quote, there was no perversion of the sexual sense. The males did not desire the white woman nor dream of ravishing the white child. So you rape children too. Freed from these restraints, and despite torture and certain death staring him in the face, the rape fiend, the Negro sadist, wreaks his vengeance and spite on some innocent child and gratifies in that unnatural manner his abominable lust. What? Slavery, instead of being justified as a political institution, was the juridical containment of black male savagery, a condition under freedom that would lead to the ravishing of white women and the moral regression of the black race. During the late 1800s, the sexuality of black males became the dominant social problem of the post-slave society. The sensual nature attributed to blacks depicted the whole race as irrational and childish, but it peculiarly made the black male a sexual deviant and aggressor. This was his nature. The onset of puberty regressed the Negro male's intellect and empowered his primal sexual lust. According to the turn-of-the-century physician William Lee Howard, and I'm not making this up either, it is a fact observed by those who are in a position to study the Negro that with the advent of puberty, all intellectual development ceases. Even the sound memory, which is the cause of much apparent precociousness, seems to be submerged by the growth and activity of sensuality. With the advent of puberty, the Negro shows his genetic instincts to be the controlling factor of his life. These take hold of his religion, control his thoughts, and govern his actions. In the increase of rape on white women, we see the explosion of a long train of antecedent preparation. The attacks on defenseless white women are evidences of racial instincts that are about as amenable to ethical culture as is the inherent odor of the race. It is this sexual question that is the barrier which keeps the philanthropists and moralists from realizing the phylogenies of the Caucasian and African races are divergent, almost antithetical, and that it is gross folly to attempt to educate both on the same basis. When education will reduce the large size of the Negro's penis, as well as bring about sensitiveness to the terminal fibers which exist in the Caucasian, then we will be able to prevent the African's birthright of sexual madness and excess from the Caucasian's viewpoint. The size of his black penis, then, indicated to ethnologists that the Negro was ruled by that appendage, unaffected by religion, morality, or reason. Because progressive methods were thought to be incompatible with his nature, his savagery was often characterized as a medical disorder in need of punitive surgical procedures such as castration. The sexual insatiability of the black male was established as a scientific fact, and rape became married to his character. By the turn of the century, social Darwinism had made a lasting impact on the ethnological considerations of race across the world. Because the African male was thought to be irrational and barbarous, he was not a patriarch and therefore unfit to rule or govern. Now notice what happens at the turn of the century. Black men have now enslaved, been childlike and feminine. They're freed and now their sexual furialis, right? Our furor sexualis is free. They become the rapist. And the way that colonialism is justified is now as a mechanism to contain savage black men who otherwise would ravage civilization the world over. The black male was thought of as a thing that is to be ruled. He could not be improved through education or religion because his sexual instincts overwhelmed the higher faculties to which ethics or reason would appeal. So whereas the white man was rational and ordered, the African male was sensual and violent and in need of patriarchal rulers to make him obey the laws of civilization. Now isn't it ironic how we place the people that are claimed by science to be ruled by patriarchs in the same category as people who wanted to be patriarchs? Right? I just find that interesting because it's black men. In the 19th century, the black male was thought to be a threat not only to white women, but to all women, black as well. Colonialism was often justified as an effort to save the savage woman from their brood male. As Louise Newman writes, quote, for over a century, Westerners have presumed that primitive women were overworked, sexually abused, or otherwise badly treated by men of their culture. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Similar to Newman, Gil Biederman argues that, quote, savage, that is, non-white races had not yet evolved pronounced sexual differences, and to some extent, this was precisely what made them savage. Savage men had never evolved the chivalrous instinct to protect their women and children, but instead forced their women into exhausting drudgery, cultivating the fields, tending the fires, carrying heavy burdens. Overworked savage women had never evolved the refined delicacy of civilized women. So judged by this model of the home founded on patriarchal projections of the empire of the mother, quote, most social Darwinists locate primitive societies at an earlier stage of development than civilized societies, and often measure the society's relative position in the hierarchy of primitive to civilized nations by women's statuses or conditions. So the black African male was identified as an abuser of the primitive woman, and colonialism was rationalized as an attempt to save her from her savage male counterpart by importing the home, which would then recreate the boundaries of the other savage distinction. So then how did this play out in women's rights? I call this the sexual inversion, or the primal rapist of feminism's foundational ethnology. The white woman was an essential component of the colonial endeavor. Her presence in the colony not only accentuated racial and gender lines, but also determined the spatial arrangement of the geography she occupied. Whereas anthropologists, such as A.N.L. Stoller, have shown that, quote, European women were not only the bearers of racist beliefs, but hardline operatives who put them in place, fostering new racial antagonism formerly muted by sexual access. The position and power of white women in the American colony has not yet been thoroughly explored. This is not to overlook the work by historians such as Alison Snyder, Margaret Jacobs, and Louise Newman, who have established that the quest for women's rights and what is generally understood as feminism is more properly understood as a complement to the imperial patriarchal endeavor rather than a challenge to it. Because early women's rights activists' arguments against disenfranchisement and patriarchy insist that white women, quote, were effective civilizers, every bit the equals of white men because of the shared evolutionary history. From Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Charlotte Gilman, there was an insistence that white women's burden entitled her to rule alongside white men at home, as in the case of the ballot, or abroad as the colonizers. From this historical viewing of white women's relations to natives and blacks, feminism is patriarchy, or more accurately, its evolutionary perfection. Despite these literatures, the history of white women's violence and gendered racial domination has had little effect on disciplinary conceptualizations of white women's rights or the gendered power white women have had over black men after emancipation. The vulnerability white women exhibited towards the racialized male other established her moral superiority to the savage brute who would threaten her piety. As the anthropologist Abalubi, I always mess up his name, Farmanyan writes that white womanhood, quote, could only be, and indeed was sanctified in contrast to a transgressive order, namely the native rapist and the promiscuous native woman. Within this context, white women established themselves as racially, hence morally and intellectually superior to newly enfranchised black men by perpetuating the idea that their virtuous womanhood was in fact the target of the savagery. So notice what happened. Black men became enfranchised by giving their lives fighting for the Civil War, amongst theories that deemed them to be incapable of fighting because they were children of feminism. They contribute to the eradication and downfall of slavery, are enfranchised, and then are immediately scientized as rapists who are threats to white women. So white women's political activism around feminism utilized the scientism of black males as rapists as arguments for which the extermination of black men were necessary for them to move into society. In other words, white women moved into the political by claiming that in order to do so, their freedom was contingent on the elimination of the black rapists from the same political spaces they recently just were enfranchised to hockey. So created as vulnerable to the black rapist, the white woman was able to justify all sorts of punitive sexual acts against free black men that indicated not only that he was unfit for freedom in the Republic, but also that his demise was necessary for her entrance into the Republic. Suffragettes used their position within patriarchy as a civilized masculine white woman to enforce violence and death against the newly enfranchised barbarous male. In this political contest, the entrance of the white woman into the perilous public from the protected home required white men to make the political space safe or to execute the white woman's primary social threat, the black male rapist. In America, lynching was the violence of choice. Lynching for the crime of rape was a political and racial rallying point for white men and white women. In a similar vein, I have to quote white women because they wouldn't believe me because they're black. Grace Elizabeth Hale observes that lynching was not only about the emasculation of black males, but also about the masculinization of white women. Lynching empowered white women to stand above the now unsexed, castrated black male as a patriarch and more man-like master who has conquered the savage black male beast. Explaining the participation of white women in lynching, Hell writes, white women often participated as announcers of the upcoming event, as spectators, and as gatherers of wood and other fuel. They directed the actions of a large number of white men by alleging rape, attempted rape, or even an attempted sting, and by demanding tortures and egging mobs on. In one case, a woman even stood on the car and yelled, "Roast the nigger." When it seemed the mob may show mercy. Not just the white male was empowered when the black man was literally and symbolically deprived of his masculinity. The lynching narrative moved white women towards masculinity, even as it subtly shifted white men away from maleness embodied in the black beast that they were trying to capture through castration. Current theoretical practices suggest that the reach of patriarchy immobilized white women such that they were not perpetrators of violence, only blind to their whiteness and exclusive in their pursuit of their racial interests. So the way that we talk about white women's rights is that white women pursued their own freedoms and excluded black women. But there's no mention of the relationship that white women, specifically white women suffragists, had to the violence, castration, lynching, and murder of black men. Among theorists, white women are imagined throughout history as passive and inactive, absent from history, and thereby absolved of the violence committed against blacks throughout history. Consequently, the violence white women committed against black men, specifically their participation in lynching, has been thought not to simply exist. At the turn of the century, white women activists supported lynching and proliferated the black myth, the black rapist mythology throughout feminist literature. The most ironic example is feminist Rebecca Latimer Felton. She began her political career as an advocate for black women in the 1880s. She began her anti-rape activism actually on behalf of a 15-year-old black girl named Adeline Maddox, who was sentenced to 5 years of hard labor for stealing 50 cents. Felton found that the treatment of young black women in the convict lease system was horrifying. They were raped by their white guards, forced to have interracial children, shackled day and night. By 1897, Felton's anti-rape activism had taken a decidedly anti-black turn. Instead of recognizing the connection the myth of the black rapist had to the Jezebel myths affecting black women, Felton embraced the criminalization and extralegal murder of black males. She wrote, quote, "If it takes lynching to protect women's dearest possession from drunken, ravening human beasts, then I say lynch 1,000 a week if it becomes necessary." This racism misandrist ideology defined not only white perceptions of black men, but also public policy towards them. The rapist was a symbol of the race problem and an obstacle to white women's political power. In 1898, however, Charlotte Gilman, like there's so many quotes by feminists, I could just go on all day, but these are just my favorite. Charlotte Gilman argued in Women in Economics, a study of the economic relation between men and women as a factor of social evolution, for a concept of the black rapist as the birth of evil in the world. This exceedingly racist text begins with a proem that tells a creation story of humanity. Humanity begins with twofold man. Notice the way in which twofold man doesn't have gender. Twofold man actually refers to both the primitive man and the primitive woman, who lack gender distinctions because they are savage. Primitive man and his female were animals. Like other animals, Gilman explains, they were strong, fierce, lively beasts, and she was as nimble and ferocious as he, save for the added belligerence of the males in their sexual competition. Twofold man was born equal. They were comrades. Consciousness came to primal man and woman slowly. Through consciousness, they learned about pain and about pleasure, and he learned about love. As they labored together in the forest, he learned about rape. He learned that he will have her when he pleases. Gilman believed that, quote, the origin of women's subjugation and sexual economic relationship was the development of the primal rapist. Like the other women of her time, Gilman equated the primitive man with the Negro male. She understood the power and meaning associated with the black man, and like her predecessors, depict him as anathema to white civilization and the white womanhood at the center of it. Gilman's text demonstrates that the idea of blacks as ungendered, savage, and primitive still formed the intellectual and progressive milieu of the 20th century. Even progressive feminists like Jane Addams were convinced of the myth of the black rapist. In respect for law, Addams argued that Southern lynching often, quote, rises to unspeakable atrocities and is complicated by racial animosity. Who would have thought? Lynching is racist. Nonetheless, she wrote that, quote, brutality begets brutality. And proceeding from the theory that the Negro is undeveloped and therefore must be treated in this primitive fashion, is to forget that the immature pay little attention to the statements, but quickly imitate all they see. The underdeveloped are never helped by such methods. The dawn of the 20th century birthed the feminist activism that used the myth of the black male rapist as a bridge between white women's moral capacities and a visible political presence and engagement with societal problems. The black male was most often the problem that feminists chose to address. While white women were framing white women's rights as resistance against the primal Negro rapist, Archibald H. Grimke argued in the Sex Question and Race Segregation that white women were still actively raping and sexually assaulting black men throughout the South during Jim Crow. After describing how white men would seduce and rape black women, Grimke said, quote, "But there is another aspect to this side of the subject which must not be entirely ignored, and that is the existence in a few instances of an illicit relation between some white women and some colored men in the South. That such relations have existed in the past and do actually exist, there are at the present time, there is absolutely no doubt whatever." Grimke explains that there have always been white women who have conducted secret sexual relationships with black men as a means of satisfying their sexual lust. For it is a fact less curious, if not so strange, that there are men who, while they would not think of marrying into a class beneath them, would nonetheless live readily enough in a state of concubinage with women of their class. And in this upper class, there are women, not many, it is true, who would do the same thing. They care enough for the men in the class beneath them to enter into illicit relations in secret with them, but not enough to enter into illicit relations with these same men in open in the gaze of a scornful and horrified world. Has it ever been seriously considered that like father may occasionally produce like daughter in the South, and that such moral lapses by a few white women of that section may be accounted for, in part at least, by the mysterious law of atavism? The sons are like their fathers in respect to their fondness for colored women. Why not one daughter to say 10,000 resemble those fathers in the same shameful, though not altogether unnatural respect? Do not such instances, few and far between at present though they may be, furnish matter for thought for people of the South regardless of sex, race, or color? It was well known that white women pursued and encouraged black men into sexual relationships. But any insult to a white woman's advances, as well as any surrender to her demands, could be considered rape. The writings and activism of early feminists helped make the fear America had of the black male rapist into the dominant political ideology of Jim Crow. Through the symbolism of the black rapist, feminism garnered popular support in this narrative of white female vulnerability to rape. By casting the primitive black male as their natural enemy, feminists of the 19th century provided added ideological fuel to the murderous lust white men expressed toward black male bodies. The primal rapists inverted the male-female hierarchy and confined black men to the modality of the slave even after emancipation. In other words, the myth of the black rapist allowed white women to exercise their sexual power over black men through illicit sexual relations and rape, and to further white men's justification to murder and lynch black men in an attempt to garner political power and not political rights to blacks in the United States. Contrary to the dissonant, extricate position from which white woman is usually theorized, excluded from the formulation of racism and sexual violence, an attentive, historically informed theorization of black males illuminates the calculated efforts white women took to make their sexual vulnerability the rallying point of white supremacist violence against black people throughout the 19th century and early 20th century. History suggests that instead of simply competing within an American political field for rights, black men were in fact excluded from American politics by the violence specific to their sexual representations as black and male, an existence that permitted lynching, rape, and execution to prevent the black male's rise as a citizen in the American public. So this history builds a justification for a theory of phallicism that I'm working with. So within the racial logics, or perhaps it's more accurate to say that in racist logics, the ideological appeal of the race and its geopolitical occupation and spatial encroachments on the other are often closely wed to the biological threat black male reproduction posed both in imperial and colonial. This idea, while certainly not new, is not often theorized as the peculiar aspect of patriarchy, which is conceptually oriented around the domination and subjugation of women, or the gendered or sexual violence of genocide, which is oriented around the physical and cultural eradication, the intent or motivation towards the elimination of a specific group or groups of people. Social dominance theorists have remained fascinated by this phenomenon in patriarchal capitalist societies, where subordinate males seem to be the constant target of the most egregious forms of violence and death. Jim Sinitis and Felicia Prado argue in Social Dominance, an intergroup theory of social hierarchy and oppression, that modern capitalist societies organize around three primary social stratification systems: age systems, where adults govern over children. Gender systems, where males tend to have disproportionate power and status to females. And arbitrary set systems, which are, quote, socially constructed in highly salient groups based on characteristics such as ethnicity, race, caste, social class, or any other highly socially relevant group distinction that the human imagination is capable of constructing. In these societies, age and gender tend towards fixity given their biological designation, but have some degree of malleability, while arbitrary set systems are marked by, quote, unusually high degree of arbitrariness, plasticity, flexibility, and situational and contextual sensitivity in determining which group distinctions are socially salient. Sidonius and Prado claim that the foundational nature of age and gender stratifications make them no strangers to very brutal forms of social control. But it is those defined by their position within socially constructed arbitrary sets which experience the most brutal forms of direct violence, especially when these arbitrary sets are defined by ethnic or racial differences. Whereas age and gender groups designate power within the dominant group or superior group, arbitrary set systems construct the characteristics of the other. Now, it's important to understand that social dominance theorists are not suggesting that within these arbitrary sets that racialized women are not oppressed. They're saying that black women or other racialized women are oppressed. But they're saying that their oppression is more about paternalism and the control of their bodies, the exploitation of their labor, etc. Racialized males, however, because they have a form of sexual competition, are exterminated. So I'm trying to develop from social dominance theory an amended conclusion, which I call phallicism, or a racially subordinate feminism. Phallicism refers to the condition by which males of a subordinated racial or ethnicized group are simultaneously imagined to be a sexual threat and predatory, and libidinally constituted as sexually desirous by the fantasies or fetishes of the dominant racial group. This concept is meant to guide a seemingly inexplicable tension, if not contradiction, between the description of racialized males under repressive and murderous regimes and their hypersexualization as objects of desire, possession, and rape by both male and female members. The racialized male is cast as a substantive social meaning or conquest as honorific, insofar as the elimination of the male threat is ridding the world of primitivity or evil. Traditional theories of patriarchy assume that the biologic of the body, specifically the male genitalia, is indicative of a social pact of sorts, whereby all penis-wielding bodies are both physical and social threats to women. In this world, the male genitalia is conceptualized as a weapon wielded against women by a body prone to rape and violence of their persons. Because all society is dedicated to this domination, it is assumed that the racialized male body, because it possesses male genitalia, is welcomed into this social union. Because patriarchal power is understood to be structurally permitted and interpersonally enforced, so we assume that there's a structure of patriarchy that resonates between how men interact with women in our interpersonal and daily lives. Black men are depicted as enacting patriarchy in any and all interpersonal relationships with women and other men. So this is the famous quote that you get from Colonialism. The hegemonic masculine is anti-woman and anti-homosexual. So the black male is ontologized or made synonymous with violence. He is perpetrator, rapist, abuser, and hyperman. His lack is interpreted not as oppression. So when he says that he is not man, that's not his oppression, but as his motivation for oppressing others, to be recognized. So while womanhood is thought to be denied, an ideal worth reclamation, so we see that women are oppressed, we believe in supporting womanhood. Black manhood is condemned and indicted for being an idea that any man should wish to possess. So within this gender paradigm, there is a denial of the violence between men orchestrated by racially dominant males, but enacted by the racial class of white men and women, for example, in the West, against racialized males historically. This violence is marked by the power described structurally by authors like R.W.S. Connell in terms of hegemonic masculinity, but is marked by the dominant ruling class woman as hyper-vulnerability. So while dominant ruling class men will relate to racialized men in terms of strict violence, dominant ruling class women relate to racialized men in terms of hyper-vulnerability to racialized men. Phallicism, then, is the complementary dynamic by which racialized males are victims of brute power of white patriarchy, which can be seen to be enforced by police killings of black men and boys, their incarceration, the rape of black males as prisoners or suspects, while having these brutish acts rationalized as being in service of the idea of protecting women, society, and civility. Because the relation of the black male to the ruling class woman is defined by sexual terror and rape, it is her social articulation of the fear of the always imposing danger that legitimizes the paranoia of black males as sexual terrors. The convergence of white male and white female sexual power, their desire, be it lust or antipathy, motivates misandric stereotypes to legitimize the murderous acts enacted upon black male bodies. And I think that we can see this not only with the recent death or killings of black men in D.C., right, by Howard, but also in the very language that was motivated and utilized by Dylan Roof. The idea that black men rape white women, the idea that black men can possess or be with white women, the idea that these black men are a threat to civilization itself has been a justification for white vigilantism. So the ideas that have been constructed on 19th century ethnology would suggest that upon freedom, the black male became the rapist, has been the dominant logic, not only in the historical mind or consciousness of 19th century ethnology, but also 20th and 21st century logics of surveillance and social control that mandates that the death of black men and boys is the only way to stabilize and protect the order of American society. So thank you very much. Open for questions.
Any questions for Dr. Curry?
Don't be shy. Just say space. Yes, sir.
I'm Curry, chairman of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in Fresno, oldest Christian movement in the world. I was just reading in the book of Ezekiel, which has some historicity. It talks about the conflicts that occurred in the nation of Israel with Babylon, this man named Nebuchadnezzar. And it talks about a conflict or a involvement with another dynasty in Egypt, 25th dynasty, 26th dynasty, which was a Kushite. Can I use the word black? Yeah, it was a black. A lot of people don't understand when I use the word black, but how so? I can't say African because a lot of people in Africa aren't black. They're not indigenous status. But Egypt, in 25th, 26th dynasty, with a black Kushite, and so almost all the dynasties were black people. But in this book of Ezekiel, this man, this prophet, who speaks for God, and we know this book was written in Babylon. They were taken, these Hebrew people were taken captive and taken to Babylon, which is in the Middle East for those that don't know. He speaks for God. He makes reference to the Cushites as men who have these penises like donkeys and have emissions, sperm emissions, like horses. No other reference in the whole Bible makes that kind of commentary about black people. So where am I going with this? We were talking about some of the ethnologists and certainly the physiologists in the 19th century. Sir Francis, the cousin of Charles Darwin. What's his name?
Governor?
Huh?
Governor?
Yeah, no, Sir Francis Dalton, father of individual differences. We look at the religion. I got to finish this question. It's a question, really. We look at religion, which was propagated to churches and Catholic Church. Even today in black churches, you see these stereotypes really implanted. You know, the child of Ham, the child of Noah, and his son Cain was cursed black, as they say. We all know that was a condition. Or that Cain, the brother of Abel, who killed his brother, was black. Right. So the church was the church. And a friend of mine I was invited to go to Egypt a few years ago to visit the Coptic bishop there, Shenouda, who's now dead. A friend of mine went in the churches, all the holy things, heavenly things were white. All the demons and devils down below were black. So I guess I'm saying the church must have been a major institution in terms of dogma, in terms of rationale. You know, we know about Ted Nugent's rock bottles and subhuman model, but I mean, the church itself, the religion, not only Christianity, but Islam as well, come on now, articulated this inferior and demonic status of black people.
Absolutely.
You didn't mention any of that.
Well, ethnology, this is the thing, ethnology before social Darwinism, so in 1830 and 1842, was based on the Bible.
That's right.
So even as late as 1884, when Margar Delay writes the Principia of Ethnology, he talks about the Diluvian epic, which is what he uses to explain how we got different races, largely from Noah's children.
I mentioned that Charles Darwin was a racist, and somebody wanted to throw me away.
No, that's just true. He was a
racist. Father of evolution.
Right. But see, this is, if I may, this is what makes it so important about the historical nuance of the time. Right, the reason that I read the piece that I was interested in the second portion of ethnology from 1859 forward is because the previous was basically looking at religion as the understanding, or the Bible, right, the Diluvian epic of what it's called back then, as the basis of race differentiation. It's not until after 1859 where evolution becomes the way to explain racial differentiation that you start getting the more nuanced accounts of how certain races develop. Which is why after that period of time, the Bible almost falls out to this theory of evolution, and in the 20th century gives way to what we now call psychoanalysis. So the Bible is very important. Religion is very important in terms of how we differentiate race and actually delineate. Because what you see in explaining the church is actually that delineation, right, between primitivity and evil. And
I agree with you, but you continue this pathology. This is pathology, right?
Absolutely.
It's pathology. That's sickness. It's either pathology or it's evil.
Right.
If you don't believe in evil, then you have to accept pathology. If you don't accept pathology, it's some sort of psychological dementia. What is the genesis of this? Now, that's I'm saying.
Well, I mean, we could go a whole lot of ways on this.
Just a brief.
I mean, if we go back to Afrocentric,
and when I say white race, across the Levant.
No, absolutely,
Middle East.
absolutely. I think that's a complicated question, because if you're reading something like Yoruba or the Iceman inheritance, then we suggest that these are natural inclinations of the white race. Given how old this is and the recent construction of race, I don't know if that's exactly accurate. I don't think it's wrong, I just don't know how accurate it is. But what we do know definitively is that the races that we now call white that originated in Europe pursued a kind of behavior and ideology which combined darker races, darker peoples the world over, to categories of inferiority and dehumanizing. Now, regardless if that is biological, if it's theological, if it's ontological, we don't know that. But what we do know is for the last 3 or 4 centuries, they constructed themselves as the enemy of every other race of people that are not white. So the way that we have to react and interpret that reality means that our understanding and nuance of the machinations they utilize, the categories they utilize, like gender, come about precisely because it's part of their technology of colonization, right? So once we accept that position, the moral deplorability of the situation is already known. It's evil. It's disadvantageous to the existence of life of the darker races of people. So what then do we say about white people? Do we say that they're ontologically evil? Perhaps. But do we say that they're unfit for humanity? I'm absolutely willing to go. Because the incompatibility of whiteness, no, this is important, because the incompatibility of whiteness and the categories built on whiteness, like gender, like class, have been imposed on black people today as if these were our categories. Exactly. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, these ideas, up to the 1950s, these ideas didn't even apply. There was no such thing as a black woman to white people. And actually, I'll tell you this is what really pisses me off. So, the idea, no, but this is important. The idea that there was women who were minorities didn't come about till the 1950s, with an article that was published in the American Journal of Sociology in 1951, and by Ann Myrtles, who was the person who wrote, Murdahl, who wrote the American Dilemma's wife. They wrote 2 essays that introduced the argument that women were minorities. Because before then, as I demonstrated, women were synonymous to the home and the basis of the race. So to say woman, you meant home, nation, or mother, right? That's why we call nations her, right? Because that was the women birthed things, right? So there was no distinction even in the early 20th century. I was born in '79, so that means 20, 30 years before that, they were still arguing about whether or not women were in fact distinct from the racial legacy that they had. Now you fast forward from 1951 to the 1960s and 70s, and you get the introduction of white women who have historically been understood as partners in colonization and imperialism, and somehow claiming that they're the same kind of minority as black people. So that means that when you codify Title VII, which is the basis of how we understand intersectionality, the argument, if you go back to the congressional record, the argument was not between black men and black women. The argument was between black women and white women. Because they feared that if you give Title VII rights to black women, white women would never be able to have employment because black women would push them out. So the congressional record demonstrates that even how you understand Title VII as an imposition between race, which is masculine, and sex, which is feminine, was not the argument. It was race, which was black women, because black women were educated and enslaved to move into commercial positions, and they introduced sex for white women so that sex could push back against the employment discrimination that black women were going to claim. They thought that it would break the bill. They thought it would stop the bill from being passed. But we fast forward to now, and you're taught about theories of intersectionality based on Title VII, which presupposes that race was masculine, gender was white and feminine, and black women got excluded, when the very debate about Title VII was about the minority category of white women moving into the same industries as educated black women. So you think about this reality of how we don't do intellectual history, and then you think about the fights we're having with each other about what we claim we learned in somebody's gender courses. Right? So if the argument for women as a minority only happened in the 1950s, and it was based on whether or not, and this was the argument that Hacker made in '51, that white women are oppressed as a caste because we see the same relationship between white men and white women as we see with white men and the Negro. Now someone explained to me how in 1951, white women used the Negro as the basis of defining their own gender paternalism and minority status. You fast forward to 1979 and 1980, somehow black men become patriarchs when they were the model that white women used to define their own minority status. Right? See, this is what I mean when I say that we only read blogs and we pick up the one article from Crenshaw and we read Bell Hooks, who has no citations, right? to understand the categories that are used on black violence. Right? If they were raping black men and black women, if they were lynching black men to make them feminine, if they were exploiting black women's bodies, see, this is what I'm saying. They wouldn't employ black men because black men were too dangerous and rapists. Right. So they brought black women from the home into the workforce, which is why you get the tripartite oppression. The black woman is a worker and exploited economically because the black man can't afford to keep her in the home. Right? This is called the Jones argument in 1949. But we come back today and want to argue about anti-black, anti-colonial analysis of post-civil rights discrimination that has us arguing about who's recognized as being oppressed more, when the issue is the condition of the black community has actually regressed from the times of Jim Crow. So this is what I'm saying, is that in order to understand the exploitation of black men, it allows you to get clarity into how black women entered the economic workforce, which was the exact argument that Angela Davis and Gloria Johnson, two feminists, black feminists that everybody loves, started their very analysis. The reason that the black women were all Marxists at the beginning of black feminism is because they were looking at the labor exploitation that was peculiar to the black woman's body. But that labor exploitation was conditioned on the fact that you couldn't keep the black woman in the home because there was no economic foundation of earning power or capital that black men could generate. And why could black men not generate capital? Because they've historically been denied jobs. Why are they denied jobs? Because part of manhood for white capitalistic patriarchal societies was the ability to be the provider and protector. So black men from 1939 all the way to the Monahan Report in 1965, which we never want to talk about black men, are depicted as deserters, neurotic, and incapable of having nuclear families. So in 65, black men are not patriarchs, but magically in 1979 with the rise of the black macho, they're patriarchs. This is silly, right? Because it doesn't have a historical and sociological foundation of the development of black male patriarchy if such a thing exists. In other words, if black men were patriarchs, they're the dumbest patriarchs in the history of the world. Because they fought for a civil rights movement that ultimately left them unemployed and at the bottom of practically every social economic system. Right? We got to think, this is what I'm saying. We have to push ourselves to think about the realities that the theories are emerging. Right? I saw this gentleman's hand first.
Right. Sounds very Freudian, for sure. 15% of slaves during the Atlantic slave trade were brought to North America. 85% went to Central and South America, Mexico, Peru, Brazil. How are some of these theories, these ideas, applied to African people throughout the Western Hemisphere, in Brazil, in Peru, in Mexico? Yes,
right.
yes, we have to talk about it. We should talk about it.
Right. Absolutely.
We may not have the sophistication of ethnological or sociological explanations, or even psychological explanations.
Sure.
But how is it portrayed in Central America and South?
So
85% of African people brought during the Atlantic slave trade in Central and South.
Absolutely. And they're very different class distinctions because we're dealing with ethnology as a British and American Anglo-Saxon science. Right? And that definitely makes some major jump. When you're looking at the explanations that come out of the Caribbean to South America, you're looking more at class analysis and exploitation because there are also a larger population of Asians and other groups of people that are also being exploited. So when you look at the analysis of C.L. James, Klein, Eric Williams, for instance, they start with the foundation of labor and labor exploitation first and foremost. Now that's because there was a little more fluidity within the racial stratifications that they were dealing with. So for example, because there was so much mixing, there was different categories by which different generations of people could pass. I mean that's even Jamaica and the Caribbean, which had a very clear color line, is going to be different than what you're dealing with in Venezuela, Brazil, or even Cuba. Right? So I think that makes a difference. Is there an ethnological strain in those countries? Yes. But even when you're reading the literature from like Portugal or the Dutch about slavery, the little bit that is translated, for them it's much more about labor or caste position than it is about racial taxonomy, which is what I
Not so much of the fixations of the fears.
Right. I mean, they still have it, right? Because like John Hoke Sweet, some cases from South America in 1756, where he talks about the largest mass rape of male slaves. So it was still going on. But you don't have the same scientific explanations used to articulate the stereotypes.
Scientific explanations.
Yeah. Ethnology was thought to be a science in the 19th century, right? I'm not defending it. Don't take it that way. But they at least thought it to be a science. Yes, sir.
Could you kind of go into the belief system of the KKK? Because what you mentioned with Rule, he used, talking about, they're raping our women and everything else. And it seems like that ideology and that kind of worldview is consistent with them. And as a guy in New York, he was espousing the same thing. So this thing is still with the KKK.
Oh, yeah.
And there must be levels of this where you're not a KKK member, but you believe all this.
Oh, no. Yeah. I studied KKK all the time. I love KKK as a historian. Right? So, when you look at Thomas Nelson Page or Thomas Dixon, the left response, right? So Page wrote the Klansman, Dixon wrote the left response. The whole argument is, again, in the second book, I really developed this thesis. The whole argument is free black men lead ultimately to the rape of white women, period. Right? Period. In case y'all don't know, the Klansman was the basis of the 1915 movie, Birth of the Nation. Right? So you have this kind of idea that, and this is what's interesting, that free black men necessarily lead to sexual violence. And this is why I'm so interested in the connection between the concept of gender, as you see, which I argue did not exist until emancipation. So the arguments that we're dealing with today about gender and female vulnerability to men did not exist until black men became free, because that's what split white men and white women from each other, because you inserted a free black male subject. So that meant that you had to accentuate gender delineations between white people, because there was a new kind of male, whereas before it was just one racial caste system. Right? So the concept of gender that we have today is very much a colonial definition of gender, which presupposes the non-existence of free black men. So free black men were then punished for becoming free by constructing an idea of gender where women were vulnerable to men, and men became rapists in relationship to women. The KKK sought to use that ideology to enforce protecting the Southern order, to disenfranchise black men at the ballot, to also limit the economic mobility of black men. Now here's what's interesting. At the turn of the century, so once you get to the 1900s, right, because you're fighting through Reconstruction, and all these white men are forming Klan units all throughout the country, white women decide to jump on the bandwagon. So white women form WKKK organizations, because what is happening? They're moving closer to the right of the ballot. So in 1920, one of the first organizations to support white women getting the right to vote was the KKK. Because they said, now that white women can vote, we can completely smother and eradicate the Negro will to the ballot. This was feminism. These were suffragettes who were being written into the Constitution. If I can I have all kinds of data. Like I have so many pictures of white women in clans, like christening babies and their Constitution. Because this is what I'm interested in. I study white women's racism and the relationship between the rapist ideology and white women's political ascendancy in America. So when you have the KKK, and you have the KKK supporting white women's votes, and then you have the nation as a whole utilizing white women as soft power to go colonize other people. So this is Alison Snyder's work, for instance, if you're interested, right? Talk about colonizing the Philippines and other parts of Asia and Africa. Right? What you have then is a union of KKK ideology, namely that a social or paternalistic order is necessary to maintain social and racial order, and the basis of how we think about colonialism in maintaining other alien populations. So the KKK is not just domestic sensibility, it is domestic and sexually diverse sensibility that shared very much in common with the colonial and imperialized race of America in terms of the 20th century. Yes, sir.
Dr. Craig, I'm Thomas Ellis. I'm a theater arts professor here at Fresno State.
Thank you for coming.
I'm very proud that I see a couple of my students that will get extra credit if they answer questions. They get extra credit for being here.
Right.
Listen, first of all, and I'm going to try to be very brief.
No, please.
When I look at the early 17th century, late 16th century in Europe, William Shakespeare talks about Othello, and the relationship between that black guy and the white woman Desdemona is full of rape and bestiality. I mean, the worst thing that could happen to this poor little white girl is for her to be married to this black beast. I mean, first. Anyway, my point is, this is going on in England just when we're starting to import slaves here.
Right.
I guess we haven't quite gotten our act together, but Great Britain is way ahead of us in terms of that kind of political racism.
Absolutely.
But my question was, one of the so many things that you were saying, that during the 19th century, white, the kind of norm was to figure that blacks were working their women too hard.
Yes.
But during that time, we were in this great expansion, manifest destiny, moving from the east to the west. We were pioneers, were working women to death.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about white folks.
I know.
So, I mean, every farm had a man and a woman, and that woman was out there plowing and shooting bear and trapping beaver and all this stuff. So, how is it that we are penalized for having the, I don't even know how that's possible, for working our women to death, but they started that.
But this is the difference, right? See, white people said it was civilization. And this is the important part, those were working class white folks. You see, the kinds of, remember, the class difference between white people was indicative of the evolutionary problem as well. Many of the theories that we talk about in the late 1800s, during Reconstruction, that that allowed black people to claim that they could improve themselves through racial betterment or racial uplift came from working class white people pushing up against the same kind of biological determinants. So we have to be very careful. You know, we're always like, yeah, you know, Delaney, yeah, Du Bois. Du Bois is very clear that he's getting this stuff by reading and challenging, you know, Adolf Bastian and reading Franz Boas, and he's having confidence with these same white folk that are semi-Marxists during this period of time in the Atlanta sociological laboratory. So they're pushing against this idea that the class of a white person indicates their evolutionary station. That being said, that's partly what you get. Because in the frontier culture, what you have are people that are pushing for the expansion of the civilization, and they become heroes. So like when you talk about the Bear War, when you talk about the expansion into the West, these aren't ruling class whites. These are soldiers. These are generals. These are white people pushing against primitivity that's trying to carve out new geopolitical spaces for America itself. Right? So that was considered a different kind of work for civilization. And it's important that the proportion that you get from women in doing that work is extremely low. So one of the things that you notice when you read like 18th century accounts of like the conquest of California, for instance, is that they predominantly brought in men to kill and murder everything. Right? This is Stoller's point as well. And once you commit genocide, then you bring in women. Because what women do, and this is so important, what women do is they shut off the genocidal tendency. Because when women come, you have to build homes and churches and belief to stabilize the community. See, white women, this is what I'm saying, this is what I mean about the ethnological point. Women are fragile in white ethnology. So when you bring women, everything stops to real civilization to protect them. So part of what you see in Manifest Destiny, this is what Ryan was saying, right? I'm sorry, this is what Kaplan was saying, is that Ryan says, oh, because the women were fragile, they were in the home to be protected. She's like, yeah, but the home was constantly pushing the border. It's like you kill people, you bring the home. You kill people, you bring the home. And that's how colonization happens. And Stoller recognized the same thing over in Asia. So that means that white women's fragility was the dividing line, the proximity that created things and boundaries like Jim Crow. So the overworked status of savage people was in that they didn't have that home that they could keep pushing the colonial boundary forward to. So that means that you had savage women who were just savage women like savage men. And one of the fears that you have in feminism, so this is the original pushback in feminism. The reason white men pushed back on feminism wasn't because they were just all sexist. They were arguing that if you have feminism, you eliminate the distinctions between men and women because they do the same thing, and that devolved the race back to savagery. See, the sexual distinctions between whites is what they held on to. And you can read this, don't take my word for it, you can literally check this. Literally read Newman's work or go read Elizabeth Cady Stanton or all the feminists that are writing the National Women's Suffrage Journal and see what they're arguing. Right? One of the arguments about abortion in the 1800s was precisely that if white women start aborting babies, that's what savage women do. So they negotiated their womb in the production of white babies and the rise of white supremacy. Because they were, this is Gilman's argument, right? White women are the heirs to white supremacy because we make you. She straight up told white men that. This is how bad white women thought they were. They were telling white men who were allegedly oppressors all through history that we make you, so we are the heirs to white supremacy. This is why she says the problem with civilization is that it made white women weak and made them make themselves attractive for white men and not co-partners in colonization. That was her argument. Her argument was that feminism was the reclamation of white women's colonial legacy to rule next to white men. Because they birthed white people. You can't have colonies if you ain't got white babies. Right? That's just reality. So at that moment, right, what do you see happening? You see white women bartering with the patriarchal system for control over racialized people. Right? So that's the distinction. It's like when you're expanding an empire, these black people were just doing the drudgery that savages do. They didn't have the racial distinction. So white people, because they were doing separate kinds of work, even though it was just as arduous, maintained that as long as we have race distinctions, we're still working towards a civilized mission. Yes, sir.
Yeah, at the election of Donald Trump, all that ideology is very prominent.
Absolutely.
And I sent, as African Americans and black men in particular, we got to be talking about how do we confront this so that our community survives this war that's being perpetrated, in the process of being perpetrated against us. I would hope that we spend some time talking about how we build families, how we deal with security, how we deal with our own economic foundation, so that we won't go through that barbarity and criminality that we've inherited for at least 400 years.
Right.
So I would say, as men in particular, we got to jump in as men and determine what kind of community that we're going to work to deal with.
Yeah, I think, you see, the problem I have with the whole election, right, is how people constantly misread what Donald Trump was saying as racism versus gender politics, right? So, and I'll give you a very clear example. So I hope I have convinced you that the idea or the ethnological origin of the rapist was a central rally point for women, at least throughout most of the 19th and 20th century, right? Now, notice what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump said that Mexican men were rapists. Everybody talks about Donald Trump saying, oh, he's a racist. And they were like, we don't understand how all these white women voted for Donald Trump because he didn't play in gender politics. Now, if we take a historical view, calling Mexican men rapists was actual gender politics to white men. Because for over 150 years, that was the central most concern to poor white women in this country. So, if we, this is what I'm saying, if we reread the origins of the rhetoric that Donald Trump utilized to make America great again, it literally reads as if it's a soft porn novel of American ethnology at the turn of the century.
Right?
Right? So for somebody like me, I'm just like, well, this is typical. Of course white women would vote for, I mean, like, I literally was not surprised, like, white women voted for Trump. Right? And then, I mean, if you follow me on Facebook, you'll see, like, I have this long post and tons of evidence. Like, white women constantly vote for conservative politics. Right. White women, like when you measure white women's attitudes, they are amongst the most racist people in the society. And the problem I have with that is not that they're racist because they're white. The problem I have with that is that they somehow displace other groups of people as the natural allies of women of color. So I'm confused, people, and I'm empirically confused. I'm confused how you have a group that's literally in the last 100 years voted for 2 liberal candidates overwhelmingly, and they become the natural allies on women's rights when they were trying to castrate, lynch, and literally disenfranchise you up to Title VII. Right. But then every other racialized group of men who empirically votes with you and demonstrates attitudes on gender that's more progressive than everybody else, and in the last 20 years even more progressive than you, become your natural enemy. Because empirically, it's false. Right? Like, there's no evidence. Like, black men literally, since the 1980s, when they were using data sets from 61 to 80, but from the 1980s, Gooley and Hunter and Davis have all demonstrated that black men's views on gender are equal to or greater than black women. Because they're not as religious, they're more working class, they're not as educated. They have no problem with black women taking political roles. Right? That's just not how it evolved. In 1994, Evelyn Simeon and Catherine Hoynies used a different study showing that black men are more progressive on gender than black women. Because again, they don't have to say hey-ups about certain kinds of traditional roles of gender. But y'all are not going to read that because that's not what you're being taught in your race and women and gender studies class. You're probably reading bell hooks with no citation. Right? So what you're introduced to is an argument that presupposes the opposition of black men and black women, despite all the evidence for the last 20 or 30 years going the other way. And people, this is not like one study. I'm literally talking about 15, right? 15 different studies that are measuring the attitudes of black men towards black women. Now, that's not to say that there's no sexism. That's not to say there's not misogyny. That's not to say there's I'm not being ridiculous. But what I'm saying is that when you measure the attitudes of black men politically, and when you measure qualitatively survey black men on their views of masculinity, the domination of women is not on those top priority lists. Right? They're much closer to attitudes. So someone please explain to me why we live in a world that constructs gender in such a way that this opposition, all the little PCAT people, right, somehow becomes a more natural coalition than black men and other racialized men. In other words, I'll make it real simple. How are you marching with the 57% of white women who put the person you're marching against in office? Very simple question. Right? And you can talk about this in terms of reproductive justice. You can tell me all that crap. But the reality of the situation is black women have been dealing with the same problems that they fear losing right now. My wife literally studies the health of black women. So all her arguments, all her data is about how black women, despite how educated they get, still have the same health outcomes as lower class black women. Why? Access, availability, habituation, allocentric load, right? This is all the stuff that, so, but you want to form over white women? I'm lost, right? The only way that happens is if, one, you don't read data, and two, you buy into the overdetermination of black men as sexist, misogynist, rapists that have been given to you by the culture, right? And I'm very serious about this. When you look at, there are 18.8 million black men over the age of, well, in this country, right? 18.8 million, right? Now I want you to think about it. When you think about the number of cases per year of domestic abuse, you're talking about, for black women, you're talking roughly about 400, 500,000. We're talking about the numbers of intimate partner homicides, which from, say, 2014, 2015, 2016, you're talking about less than 200. Those incidences are being offered to students of liberal arts because we don't have a penchant for data as evidence that there is an irreconcilable difference between black men and black women. Those crimes, those 200 women that were killed by their partners, those were single offenders. So that means one black man for each day, right? So 200 black male offenders that killed black women. You know how many black men were killed by black women that same year? Roughly 100 to 130. So we're arguing about a 60 or 70 person difference given the kinds of violence that exist in our communities. And people, we're talking about 18.8 million black men. We're talking about 20.5 black women. You want to use hundreds to determine the personality and threat of millions. See, this is what I'm saying about how we're taught. Right? You have a problem with domestic violence. I study domestic violence. Let's have a real conversation about the realities of drug abuse, previous exposure to trauma, recidivism, right? Bidirectionality, which is the dominant form of violence in our communities. You know, you've seen it. Men beating women, women beating men, escalation, children see fighting, children, cousins, come back and start beating. You've seen this pattern. I've seen it. But you don't want to have a conversation about that. You pull out bell hooks, right? But see, this is what I'm saying. We don't approach the study of gender and sexuality in empirical ways that actually matter to the circumstances we're dealing with in life.
Right.
Right? You'll come up, generally speaking, I present this kind of information. The first thing people say, patriarchy, black male privilege, misogynist. Why? Because I actually care about the causation of empirical problems in our communities. Because I don't think people without citation should be cited in academic I'm sorry. Right? I like data. I like history. Now that means that when we have conversations about domestic violence, we have to talk about the trauma of black men and black women. Yes. We have to talk about mutual perpetration of violence. We have to talk about child abuse. We have to talk about statutory rape. We have to talk about things that make us uncomfortable. Because guess what? That's actual causality. Right? Poverty causes that kind of violence. But then you come back and you cite a blog. And I'm not joking here. Literally, I had a white woman who was the editor of my book cite a blog, right, against me on domestic violence because I told her that you have to look at the actual statistics of police homicide to understand the kind of vulnerability black men have. If you're killing 292 to 310 black men a year, and 9 to 20 black women are dying, we call that a disparate impact, right? There's a difference. So she was like, oh, but you got to look into partner homicide. I was like, oh, I love it. I was like, this is, and I mind you, this is chapter 3 of my book. But she was like, well, I couldn't get that far. I have an emotional reaction when I read the book that I'm reading. So this tells you something, right? Because the book, this is partly from the book, in addition, half was from the second book, right? So you have an emotional reaction because white women are held accountable for their structural imposition of racism. And you can't get past that to see that there's a very real economic and cultural account of how we need to start addressing interpersonal violence in our own communities. Because the work that feminists have done around gender, while beneficial for their group, because their group is massively unidirectional. White women are making examples of white men if you already want to look at numbers. Right there, right? But when you look at that data, that's a different dynamic than what's happening in our own community. Right. So why are we using white dynamics, which are primarily caused by a single perpetrator view, white men beating white women, or white women beating white men, as a way to talk about the cyclical violence that we know happens sometimes daily, sometimes on a weekend when one person gets drunk in our community, right, which is undergirded overwhelmingly by the last 40 years of evidence in terms of poverty and lack of employment opportunity, depression, right? That's what I'm saying. We have to do a better job in understanding what's actually going on. So when speaking to the realities of a Trump administration, right, the idea is that structural accounts of gender have to take place of the ideological opposition that we keep putting first and foremost. Think about this. We say sexism is bad, right? We generally all agree, right? We're all good black liberals. Sexism is bad, right?
Yes.
What's the effect of sexism on black women next to their counterpart? So if you take, and I mean, think about this seriously, because I know it's contentious, I will pull a quote for you, but imagine for one moment, if Ellen Pence, who's the inventor of the idea that men abuse for patriarchal power over women, was wrong. Pretend, I don't know, that in 1999 she actually wrote this, she just made it up. Right? Let's say that's true. What then would be the consequence of sexism in the black community, of black men to black women? So if patriarchy and misogyny is not the causation of domestic violence, then what does sexism look like? What then would be the kind of violence that would unify white feminists and black feminists together? Any idea? See, that becomes problematic for a political program. If the only unity you have is the assumed danger of black men to black women. See, and that's what I'm talking about. I didn't make that up. She actually said it in 1999, 4 years before she died. Right? Patriarchy has nothing. She was like, we just started that because we're trying to get the VAWA passed. Like, you know, yeah, I know. I'll give you the article if you want. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'll see it.
Yeah, yeah. So the Duluth model was basically an ideological component to get the Violence Against Women Act posed. And she actually says in her article that the reason that we don't study, say, women's abuse of men and women's abuse of children is because they had to make white women look like angels so that they could only be seen as victims. Right? So these are political programs. She died in like 2003, 2004, but about 4 or 5 years before she died. Right? There's a whole thing. It's called On the Philosophy of Duluth or something like that. So we've been arguing with each other for the figments of a white woman's imagination. Right? And we don't care. Why? Because we don't read anything beyond what people give us.
Right.
But then when we try to understand problems in our own communities, it's like, oops, that doesn't work because it's false. We have nothing to rely on because we're not training people to go through the archives of ideas to pull new theories to explain what's happening amongst our own people.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Professor, quick question. It's obvious that there has been doors open for us to know the truth now, right? So my question is, what do we do now as a black people to actually apply this change? The reason why I ask is because we have a lot of people that they're hearing in the moment, and then as soon as they leave, they go back to the same norm. So what do we do because you're doing it, professors like yourself, y'all doing y'all job, right? So then what do we do as a community to make that change?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So this morning we had a teleconference that was talking about the introduction of Black Male Studies. And I think that y'all have a tremendous resource here with Dr. Johnson, who certainly studies black men. And I want to emphasize, people, that a Black Male Studies paradigm is not exclusive of black women or women in general. What it's trying to do is make the same kind of intervention that black feminism made in the 1980s, which is the reconceptualization of how gender operates. It's just that we have not had the opportunity to do so next to men. So imagine what you criminology majors could contribute to an emerging field that's looking at papers, that's going to grad school with the idea of actually talking about causalities, economic and psychological causalities of intimate partner violence and intimate partner homicide. Imagine what you sociologists could do being trained in black male studies to do new black family studies in a world where you don't have the same kind of opposition between black men and black women. Right? These should be corridors that leads to new research, and the important part here is policy. So one of the things that me and some of my co-authors are trying to do is get our publications on statutory rape and misandric microaggressions, so William A. Smith's work, right, to affect the way that education institutions and social workers interpret certain kinds of abuses of young black men and boys within black families and communities, right? So part of the stepping stone really is about how students, administrators, and other professors here really try to build and pick up the momentum for working around, what could be the first Black Male Studies program or concentration in the country, right? And this is vastly important. I mean, when you're thinking about because let's be honest for a minute. The gender theories that we've talked about thus far haven't brought the black community any closer. It's made some people very, very rich.
Right.
But it hasn't actually solved any of the problems in our community. Right? And not, that's not to say that people can't be feminists. I'm not getting into all that. I'm just making the argument that it hasn't been a piece of the pie. But I'm like, if your first premise is true, then why do you want a piece of ineffective pie? Right?
Exactly.
The issue is that black women get through high school, not without their difficulty. They get through college, and then you discriminate against our women. So you pay them less than what they're worth. The problem with our men is that you don't let them through, so they simply turn to poverty. So then what happens? You have a problem where black men become working class and unskilled. Black women become educated, skilled, get better jobs, but don't get paid what they're worth, so they have a disproportionate amount of debt, which decreases the ability for them to accumulate wealth. Now, this is a very simple dynamic that we know. And then when you talk about poor black women, you're talking about underemployment. You know, when your mom or aunt's working 2 and 3 jobs part-time, they never give her full benefits, never get her full insurance, but nonetheless, that's how she's making ends meet. That affects our women. Whereas unemployment affects our men. These are things we like to call facts. So imagine if we use facts as the basis of theories to talk about the economic substance and the relation between black men and black women. Imagine the world that could happen, right? So that's how we have to start making different demands on education. And I'm not saying that it's cliche. It's like, I'm very serious that if think about what would happen if you now hold every person, every teacher accountable. So you know the famous question, what about black women? Starts, what about black men and boys? What's the relationship? What's the relationship between black men and black women? What about lower class black men and black women?
Right.
What about middle class black women and black women?
Right.
What about, hold them accountable for what they're telling you. Because I guarantee you that they're trained in a traditional canonical or disciplinary formula that doesn't know anything beyond the traditional college and look space.
Right.
So we have to make people accountable for what they're teaching us as students. And it's not an ideological program. If you say domestic violence is X, then you pull up the 2010 NISVS data by the CDC. It's like, why is there 4.9 million black men affected by domestic violence a year if Bell Hooks says this only affects women? Right? So is the government wrong or is Bell Hooks with no citation? Right? See, because we have to be responsible for our own education.
Absolutely.
And the flip side of that is when we start motivating students into what they want to do, we have to make them invest in seeing the benefit of studying their own people. Right? I mean, and this is not a simple task, but this is how you concretely motivate people. The reason you have the domination of white theory and white policy towards white people is because colleges generationally reproduce the ability of white people to do things for white people. But we get to black people and suddenly we learn theories that make us hate each other rather than want to study each other. Black women come out and think they're oppositional to black men, but then guess what? Most likely you're marrying black men. Right? Despite our attitudes of interracial dating, which is constantly on the increase, black women do not do very well in marrying white men. Right? So that means that we have reality where we are out of line with what we think we may get once we become educated. So you probably need to fix where you are. I'm just throwing that out there. Right? So it means that our theories and our education have to become more formulated to the realities we live in. We've been stuck in a post-structuralist and discursive world that has disregarded history, that has given us alternative facts like standpoint epistemology. But now we're mad because white people co-opted that, and now suddenly Donald Trump is more postmodern than all the black people. Right? You got to start thinking, people. These are not accidents, right? Young ladies back in there. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. My question is, as far as black male studies is considered, for smaller schools like Fresno State, which only that struggles to fill classes in Africana studies, how does that look for black male studies? Will that be like instituted in larger universities that have larger departments in black or African studies?
Do you have a gender studies program here?
Women's studies.
Women's studies? Okay, so if you're going to do a black male studies then, and you're having trouble filling Africana, then why not make this an interdisciplinary listing where you get dedicated seats for multiple disciplines? So it is interdisciplinary? Okay, so then what? So you can pull seats from there, right? And then you got people in sociology, so create dedicated seats that'll fill the class. At my university, for instance, you could actually have students petition for a certain class. So you can, and that way, because you get dedicated seats. So all you have to do is say, if you want a class on black male studies, Or if you want a certificate, I don't know the situation of if there's a grad certificate or not, but to do a grad certificate is basically 16 to 18 hours, right? I mean, you can get, all you need are bodies in this case, right? We're not talking about extra funding. Like, you basically need bodies and maybe dedicated speakers that will come in to supplement instruction if you only have 1 or 2 professors.
The seats aren't dedicated.
They're not dedicated? Okay.
It's cross-listed.
Just cross-listed?
And that's true all across the state.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, with another thing is then you recruit the students that you don't want to take the course, right? I mean, you create different mini conferences on Black male studies, right? Get students that are interested in it, and then say, look, would you take a course in Black male studies if, we're teaching this, this, and this, and, try to fill your course. I mean, there's no, when you come up with a new discipline, there is no quick fix to how it's going to succeed, right? It's an argument, and it's an argument that people have to internalize and think is a good idea, and people have to start thinking about it. It's the same thing that happened with feminism. It's not like one day feminism woke up and said, hey, today we're here. Well, maybe kind of, because it was supporting my wife. Right. But I have to retract. Like, Wallace was funded by Steinem, so, but unless you have a white benefactor, that's not generally how it happens, right? So it means that it's just like Black studies. You have to put some work into it. And again, this doesn't have to be an independent program. This could be an area of concentration within Africana studies. You can create 2 or 3 classes that at least give you some kind of certification or area of concentration on a diploma or on a degree, right? So there's lots of different ways to integrate this into various curricula. And even with women's studies, and this is the thing, is that, given that Fresno State is it's a Hispanic service institution, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the population minorities, you could overlist this with something like coloniality and gender, right? You could teach a class on the coloniality or colonial origins of gender, get Black male studies in there, and also enhance how we think about things like ethnology or white women's role in imperialism, right? There's so many things you can do with a curriculum to get buy-in from the students. I think that that's the important part, is that you get undergraduate students excited about learning something different that expands the reality, expands the kind of conversations they have, rather than forecloses it. I mean, could y'all imagine what it would look like if all the students started doing papers on new theories of domestic violence and social work? Like, what if you start an undergraduate research program where some of your best students are publishing with your professors? I mean, imagine how that would help you go to grad school. Imagine what that would change about having a historically Hispanic service institution doing that kind of work. These are things that you could do without major funding, right? It just requires willpower and dedication, right? So these things, I think, they're doable. It's a question just of what people want institutionally. Yes, sir.
Yeah. One thing I've always said is that it's not our problem; it's their problem. That's one. 2. I like that we're starting to put an Afrocentric argument or counter-argument to what's going on. If you watch Roland Martin in the morning, here in the morning time, he always puts forth the Afrocentric argument. 3, with Black Lives Matter, and then with Dr. George Yancey, the whole concept or construct of fear of the black body. This whole, bringing that forth as an attack on the black body. I like how people are starting to use that, because that is so powerful and so impactful. With your work, do you use, fear of the black body or the construct of the black body and the attack upon it?
Oh yeah, most of my work is on black male death and dying. So this is just, I'm interested in kind of the development of the rapist. But most of my first book, the reason it's called a genre study of the dilemmas of manhood is because the whole book is about the different technologies white people use to kill black men. So I have a chapter in there on eschatological dilemmas where I literally go through the history, using James Baldwin and other historical sources. I go through like the history of rape during slavery, homoeroticism during Jim Crow. James Baldwin's Going to Meet the Man. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Where a cop is basically becoming sexually aroused by watching the lynching of black men using a boy, so he can have sex with his white wife. How that then turns on the contemporary way in which cops genitively mutilate, castrate black men, stomp on their testes, shock them, right? So everything, all the stuff that I do is around the fear of the black body and what I call the death drive of white erotics. I think the difference between me and Yancey is Yancey looks at it from a phenomenological standpoint, how white people fear black men. I look at it from a politics of erotics in history, where I show that this is not new. Right? I don't think the phenomenological argument has enough substance to account for history. Right? Because this isn't just fear, this is science. This is deliberate. They engineered society, so this is the way they deal with it. And Yancey doesn't criticize black women, I do.
Okay.
Right? So I mean that's the big difference, is that I'm not afraid to talk about the historic role that white women have played in the rape and mutilation of black women's bodies. Right?
So on that point, a lot of white philosophers, female philosophers I know, they recant.
Oh yeah, because it allows you to get into the phenomenal problem of experience, fear, and desire. So a white person could read Yancey and come away thinking like, I just have to could make a reduction to how I stereotype black people. I'm like, no, right? I think you're fundamentally racist, right? And this is where I disagree with philosophy. I don't think reason undoes racism.
Right.
It doesn't undo something that's deliberately constructed. Like, even I've argued with Charles about this. I mean, even in the epistemology of ignorance, like, how is it that white people are ignorant, but they just do it so well?
Right.
Right? Like, why is it that white people are never ignorant and make the mistake of liberating black people? Like, you never, like, I don't know what's going on. I don't understand racism. Oops, I freed a whole bunch of black people. That's not what happens. Right? It's never happens. It's never like, oops, I stumbled and liberated black folks. It's always that I'm ignorant and I'm subjugating, raping, mutilating, or doing something to black people. I just don't think that that's ignorance. And I think, given the historical work I do, I'm one of the only philosophers that does intellectual history in the country. I think, given the historical work I do, it just becomes implausible to think of the epistemologies of ignorance or even the phenomenological accounts of racism to be likely. This is programs that's been scientifically and deliberately engineered upon the foundations of white patriarchal society itself.
Do you foresee maybe in say the evolution that this will kind of change, or you think this is just systemic to the human condition that
about racism? Or?
Racism.
No, this isn't a change. You see, this is when I came out of philosophy, I was one of the few people that I introduced Derek Bell. Besides Bill Lawson, I've written the only pieces on Derek Bell's work in philosophy. There weren't very many old school race critics. So I argue that racism is permanent, and many people disagree because they're like it's deterministic, etc. But they haven't read enough Bell. Bell is not arguing that things stay the same. Bell argues that when you have change, change can also be regressive. So the way that we think about change about race relations in America today is we say race relations always progress, that they're always moving to some amelioration or better than some advancement. But Derek says, no, you'll have advancement and you have 2 steps back. An example, Obama, Trump.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? So, because notice what people are not doing. Nobody's asking the question, where do all the white moderates go? Right? No, because seriously, right, this is what we said. Oh, this is an advance in American race relations. The moderate white person that's college educated and female now sees economic opportunity under a Democratic president that just happens to be a black male. Right? That was your explanation for 8 years of Obama. So what happened? They're not any less college educated.
Right.
They're not any less dependent on economics. So how you go from a moderate college educated white woman who has an investment in the economic expansion policies of a Democratic president who calls feminism, right? They're using feminism word, right?
Right.
To Donald Trump, who's clearly like, I'm rich, they let you do what you want. I can ground with you.
That's right.
Right? Like, where's that demographic going? Because if they were in college, at worst, they're 28 now.
Right.
They're in their 30s, so they're still within the progressive voting law. What happened? Well, we can't ask that question because that's too much like, I don't know, research. Right? So because notice what we do, right? And notice what we do. Oh, the one study that comes out, we're breaking up. Well, out of 3,000 people surveyed, 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump, 13% of black men. You got more articles about 13% of black men who voted for Trump than the 53% of white women who voted him in. Right? And then you looked at the black women, and it was like 6 or 7% of black women voted for Trump. When you look at the demographic, it was uneducated black men that voted for him. It was educated black women that voted for him.
Right.
Well, that's a problem. That's a real problem. But see, we read black people through stereotypes. Right? And when I was actually arguing with people on Facebook about this, I'm like, look, I'm not defending anybody voting for Donald Trump. Right? I kind of set this one out. I was like, let's see what happens. But at the same time, what were black men's choices? Vote for Donald Trump, or vote for Hillary Clinton, who thought you were a super predator and locked you up.
Right.
Right? And here's what's funny. They were like, oh, black men didn't want to vote for a white woman when half of the votes that weren't for Hillary were for Jill Stein. So they said they didn't want to vote for a woman, and they voted for like 60% voted for a woman. Like, this is ridiculous. It's like how we study black people is ridiculous. Like I can't give you an explanation because it's just stupid. Right? I don't want, because I'm not really good with using like all kind of jargon that I know. It's just dumb. Like you said that she didn't vote for, that black men didn't want to vote for a woman, and then you have like, 4 or 5% vote for Jill Stein. Right? Clearly you're reading them through stereotypes. You're reading through this view that they're misogynist, etc. Never mind the fact that like 83 or 87% of them voted for Clinton still. Like that we in general terms we call that a majority. Right. 87% of the population voted. Come on. I mean, this is it wasn't 92%. So it's come on, man. This is laughable. This is laughable. So what we end up doing is creating narratives and stories that are ultimately dilapidated, that really have no currency with our current reality, but we embrace them nonetheless because they fit with the ideological program that we get on the salon.com, or we get from Fort Harriet, or we get from some other blog that doesn't do citations either. Right. It's our responsibility as educated students is to question everything. And that means that even when we have an emotional attachment, and this is one of the criticisms I have about philosophy, even when we have emotional attachments to certain ideas, we choose to overlook those flaws in ideas for the love of philosopher theory. And I remember once I told my colleagues that I find out that I'm wrong all the time because I research. And they were like, what do you mean you find out you're wrong? I was like, see, that's why I don't write or publish in philosophy journals as much. Because I come up with any argument for any ridiculous idea, even if it's a counterfactual, and it becomes possible because we call it philosophy or theory. Right. But then when I introduce a theory that I have to actually use to explain evidence, it limits what I can say because the evidence and facts constrain what I can think of as possibly causing it. I'd much rather find out in reading as much as I do that I am incorrect and publish arguments that are about what I think could be a possible explanation. So in my book, I talk about integral partner violence and integral partner homicide through a system of internalized vulnerability. I suggest that the reason that black men and black women abuse each other, and black men are often on the receiving end of bidirectional violence, is because black women internalize not only the vulnerability of black men to racism, but the positionality of recognizing their suffering under racism. So it's not just that black women say, oh, society hates black men, I hate black men too. It's that they know that because you hate black men, and if you hurt black men, there's no response to it. That conditions part of the competition for resources and trauma in our community. Now why is that a theory? Because it actually explains why we see bidirectionality. We've internalized not only the negation, but the response to the negation of hurt another black. Right? That's the problem. Right? It's not enough for us to say that we hate ourselves. We have to also look at the other part of the conversation, which is we hate each other and we know there's no consequence for hating each other. Because if you hate white people and say that too often, sometimes you don't get jobs. Right? See, this is what I'm saying. There's a consequence to hating the oppressor. There's not a consequence to hating a man. Right. Everybody hates him. There's not a consequence to objectifying a woman. Everybody does. You see what I'm saying? See, this is what I'm talking about. We're socialized even today in terms of what we can say. You ever find it funny that all the top, intersectional theorists never attack white supremacy? You ever find that funny? Like, there's constant trade-off of like, well, black men get too much attention in the news. You shot another black man, we're ready to march for him. We're making black women invisible. Or you keep killing black people. And that creates the whole problem altogether. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you're mad because 300 black men get shot, and that's taking up all the white media space. And the 9 or 12 or 20 black women, depending on the year, get shot, and nobody marches for them. So you attack the working class, because these are working class uneducated black men, by and large. You attack the 300 uneducated black men for dying too much, and then say that the black women who died should be used as a catalyst for conversations with the very white people who don't care about black people in the first place. Because you ain't going to black communities saying, hey, let's get together and march. You're telling white people so white people give you money for complaining about the poor black communities not marching. Where the real issue is white people killing black people. Right. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying and how easily it is to be distracted? Yeah. Because we create arguments. And think about the kind of like what burden does that put on young black men? Like, okay, we shouldn't talk about 300 black men being killed. We should talk about the 9, 12 to 20 black women being killed. But before we had Mike Brown, black feminists didn't talk about the black women being killed. Because their arguments were all isolated to domestic abuse literature. The only person that even talked about black women being killed by the police was Joy James. Because she talked about black women being killed like Sandra Bland in prison. So Why? Because during the period of time in the 1980s, this was the argument that while black men may suffer in the streets, black women suffer in the homes. So they kept to that paradigm. And then suddenly, overnight, oh, it's changing just because of misogyny. Come on, man. Do we really distrust ourselves that much? Do we really, I'm serious, because think about the argument. Do we really believe that in our communities, our daughters, wives, and mothers get shot and no one cares? We believe that about ourselves. No. The reason that we see different demonstrations is because certain people get picked. Because Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown are two people from two different years, where if you add up the two people, the years, 600 people, black men got shot.
Right.
That's not what we call representative, right? But you see what I'm saying? We distrust ourselves so easily, right? I saw your hand this one. No, go ahead.
No, I was asking, how would we be able to fix that problem within the black community?
So the problem of invisibility? Or?
It was, you moved past it, and I forgot about it.
So like, was it domestic abuse or was it?
It was more
brutality?
concerning with, I'm trying to think about it, I'm so sorry. Come back to me.
Okay.
You mentioned the 200, I just want to drill back
Yeah,
in because this is really kind of arresting. 200 black men killed white women? Is that what, black females?
No. Oh, so in terms of, it's a part of violence?
Yes.
Yeah, so in 2014, 2015, the amount of black women killed through it's a part of violence was 191 and 215.
215. 191 and 215.
Yeah, so 191 in 2014, I think it was 215.
Was that FBI data?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's
So
UCR.
there's an FBI repository of all.
Yeah, UCR. Yeah,
But I do want to backtrack for a second. What are the domestic violence statistics looking like? Because that gets a lot more play.
Yeah, so the domestic violence, so if you're talking about different, so the domestic violence statistics vary. And usually they come up with a count every 10 years or so. So the most recent count by the CDC is the 2010 NISVS data, and that data estimates in a given year about 500,000, 400,000 to 500,000 black women, and like 550,000 to 600,000 black men that are affected within a 12-month period. In terms of lifetime prevalence, you're talking roughly about 5.9 million black women over a lifetime, and 4.7 million black men.
How does that compare to white?
Oh, their population. Like,
this is smaller.
Yeah.
This is smaller.
Yeah, our rates are higher because our populations are small.
Yeah, I got you.
Right? But white people make it. That's one. The second largest group of domestic violence in the country is white women. The second largest group of perpetrators of domestic violence are white women, just because of the sheer number of white women.
Yes.
Right? So you're much more likely to be a white woman who's an abuser than you are a black man who's an abuser. But that's not the story you tell. Right? And again, if anybody ever wants to see these data sets, just email me and I'll send it to you because they're easily PDFs. Right?
I'm not dropping this. I don't want my colleagues to get mad.
No.
But the other thing is that this is a CDC. I have to go to CDC to get those rates?
Yeah. I mean, if you go to the CDC and look up into partner violence, you can download the 2010. This is published in 2015.
So, but the FBI is not going to have that information.
The FBI counts homicide. So the UCR, the UCR is going to count homicide, relations of homicide. So that's going to be the violence. Like there's a violence against women report every year. They use the expanded homicide data to talk about it's part of homicide. So basically, what they do is they compile. They go through each state and they tell you the relation. So if it's boyfriend or spouse, they count those. 91, 2000. Right. But again, that's what I'm saying because you go to the FBI repository and they do an online search where you can talk about the relationship and do the age ranges. And within a given year, so I did the last 20 years. You're talking about so if the relationship is an intimate father, mother, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, etc. I mean, in black culture, you're talking about less than 200 people a year on both sides. So that's single offender men to women. You're talking basically about 200, 250 a year. You're talking about women to men. You're talking basically about 125, 175. And what upset me is I recently did this about a month ago. I think I actually Facebooked you when I found this because I sent you the link. I was so mad because, and this is what I mean by constantly proving myself wrong. I was so upset because I'm like, there are almost 40 million black people in the country, and we arguing about, if you add them both together, we're about less than 500. Like, I don't know how we create theories of perpetuation on 500 people when there's 40 million, almost 40 million people, black people in this country. And then I felt like a fool. This was again when I found, see I'm wrong. I felt like a fool because this whole time I'm arguing with theories, and I think I actually explained something which explained nothing. Right? My wife's a sociologist. She's like, this is ridiculous. Why are you wasting your time? I was like, because this is what the people in my field say. She's like, listen, this number is so insignificant. We can't interview all these people. She's like, the fact that you can do it with a qualitative study means that it's insignificant. Right? In terms of creating a general theory of causation. Not insignificant because black people die, but insignificant in terms of creating a theory of causation. So we're having arguments at conferences literally saying, black men are killing black women. We see people on YouTube, black men are killing black women. And you're like, really?
Black men are the greatest killers.
Yeah, so it's even like the silly Jamelia Lemieux and Amber Phillips interview on December 15th of last year. Right? Black men are the #2 killers. That's not true. It's never been true. It came, and I actually have this in my, I've actually researched it. You can go to the Department of Justice website right now and Google Eric Holder's speech on domestic violence. And at the bottom of that speech, because that's where the statistic comes from, you will find a disclaimer that says the statistic is wrong. It is not true. It is not a debate. It is a mistake that was written to other journals because they misread a 2003 National Institute of Health report. What? So the National Institute of Health report in 2003 said from the ages of 15 to 45, black men were the largest killers of the #1 killers of black women from intimate partner homicide. The problem is, homicide was the second or third cause of death. Intimate partner homicide is a subset of homicide. So it can't be a #1 killer, right? So then when the CDC discovered this, on March 11, 2014, they actually changed it. So there's a redaction both on the website and on the actual report that was published March 11, 2014 that says that this was a mistake, right? But then Amber Phillips just goes on the breakfast show and suggests the rhetoric of black men is so violent and hyper-masculine. But you're just killing black women. Under the age of 50, you're the second largest killer. And then she goes on Instagram and says, no, I made a mistake. They're the largest killer. Right? This is what I mean about holding people accountable to facts. That statistic does not actually exist. You could check it from the government citation. Don't take my word for it. Don't trust the website. Go to the data sources. Right? Yes, ma'am.
How do I personally, and for all the other black women, how do we deal with, because I'm sorry, I'm so nervous, but the majority of black men that I have encountered with, they say they don't date black women because we're like dead and irrational, whatever, like all those negative stereotypes.
Majority?
That I encounter personally.
Okay.
Like, a lot of black men tell me like, oh, I don't date black women because, all this stuff. And we have like media reinforcing it, like what do we do? Like, because it's not true, it's not true, but.
Right. I mean, like I would look at region. I would consider age. I mean, overwhelmingly black men marry black women, like over 90%. Right. So how old are you?
I'm 22.
I mean, even in your age cohort.
That must be some California.
Yeah, but if you just think about the number of available black men, so I'm sure here your ratio is probably something like 1 to 4, 1 to 5 in terms of black women to black men, right? I mean, I'm sure, because there's usually a gender disparity in college. So if that's the case, I mean, you may be dealing with like a selection bias. Right. Right? Like, people who are, but I mean, I don't know, if you got a sample of 10, that seems pretty high that none of 10 black men would all say they don't date black women. Right? So I don't know, like, demographically that's not possible. Because even if you say, like, so 47% of black men say they're open to interracial relationships, so that's 4.7, you're around 5. I mean, at least half of the 10 men that you talk to should be statistically open to dating a black woman. So, just demographically. So I would say either A is probably your region, so I don't know if the vulnerable, so there could be something like, so here, there may be higher rates of potential Latinas or white women that are willing to date black men, so you just may be losing the competition in the smaller number, right? But then that becomes a regional difference. So if you move somewhere else, that changes. So like you go to the South, there's nothing but working class black men there. You would be scooped up in a minute. Yeah. Right? No, but seriously. And the other part about that,
right now,
is about the availability. So if you're asking men in college, that may be part of the selection bias too. right? Because now if you're asking working class black men and they're like, I don't date black women, that seems a little suspicious, given that they don't really have access to any other type of women except these teams. Right? I don't know. Like, it doesn't kind of fit with the demographic pattern, so I don't know. Right? And you're 22, so you're almost at the age that some black men would start considering marriage. So in 3 or 4 years. So most black people get married around 27 to 32. So you're close enough to that time period that should disappear in a few years. Did I see a hand somewhere?
Yeah, the state of Texas, and it's a related question, is purported to have one of the highest college black representation in higher education in the United States. Is that based on some law in Texas that enables the top 5 or 8 or 6%?
Yeah, so
tell me about that.
It was the same thing in Louisiana. We had tops. They call it something different in Texas, but I heard that they're trying to get rid of that. But basically guaranteed that the top 5 or 10% of any school gets free admission into universities.
Is that still enforced?
I think last year may have been the last year.
We're trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, because under the new Republican administration, they've been cutting back everything. They froze hires this year as well. Yes, sir.
I recently read, well, I actually listened to the podcast for an English assignment, and it was this Caucasian nationalist who celebrated the election of Donald Trump, stating that it was an act of nationalism. And he, I listened, it was 48 minutes, and he argued nationalism, being a patriotic act on Eurocentric race. And then he furthermore states that the United States should move for more of an ethnocentric race, like where African Americans are in this region and Caucasians are in all the other different regions. What do you have to say about that?
It sounds like what white people generally do. Right. I mean, you got to understand, I mean, just because, it's like de facto segregation. Right? That's what they do now. That's why they're constantly redrawing districts. Yeah. Right? So, that's not necessarily a new idea. Right. I think the problem with the alternative right and the other white people that form the kind of core of the GOP is they're kind of pissed at the alternative right because you're not supposed to say this out loud. Right. Right. Like you're bringing attention to a practice and trying to win supporters to it when we do this anyway. So shut up. Right. Right. And I think Richard Spencer came to Texas A&M, and and one of the things that happened was that there was a protest and there was this unity rally, and white people got to feel good about themselves. But nobody addressed the fact that this person was basically coming in as an attack to black and brown people, specifically black and brown men. That's correct. And one of the things that I faulted the university for was they commissioned a white woman to come up and give a talk to black and brown students about Richard Spencer. And what I asked is like, so if a person came in threatening to rape female students, would you then say, let's get black and brown men to speak about their experience? Right. Of course you would. So why does the white woman become the proxy for how black and brown people, specifically black and brown males, understand their relationship to the alternative right? I just have a huge problem with it. But again, I go to a white supremacist institution. I work with people who are verifiably against recruiting and hiring black males. This is part of the program. It's the most conservative university in the country for a reason. Right. So I think that when you see the alt-right, basically you're talking about what we just discussed. You're talking about a pro-white, pro-nationalist racial program. And again, I've asked people to consider. They say, oh, Donald Trump's against women because he's against abortion. It's like, come on, people. Right. Donald Trump. So this was the pink hat mark. Right. Okay. But people think about it. If I want to build an empire, what did we just learn? Who's necessary to build empires? White women. So why would I want white women not to be able to kill white babies? Why would I stop immigration? Why would I start deporting people and then not control whether or not white women can have babies? See, this stuff makes perfect sense if you just switch the historical time period. Right? Of course, if I want to make America great again, make America white again, I have to stop immigrants from coming in because they reproduce fast. Right. I have to get rid of racialized males because they reproduce. They keep impregnating everybody. And I have to increase the birth rate of white people. So how do I do that? Stop them from having abortions. Right? This is not rocket science. Right? White Mexicans are rapists. Get rid of Mexicans. All right, lock down the borders. Black men are criminals. Put them all in jail. Right? Let's cut off trade with everybody. Nobody in or out of the country. White women need to have more babies. George Bush said that, and that didn't work because he tried to do it through the church. I got it. Let's eradicate abortion. come on, this is this old school, imperial program, right? But we think we're beyond that, and this is the problem that I have with black scholars that, claim to study race, is that in the academy, you will let a black liberal scholar who spends all their time writing about American philosophy or Foucault or Kant or Dewey, you will let them advance their career just fine because all the people that talk about race, they're just pessimistic and ideological.
Right.
The minute Donald Trump gets elected, somehow now all these liberal black progressives that study all these traditional white figures, we want to talk to them because they're disappointed just like us.
Right.
They're just as hurt and disappointed that democracy in America failed. But all the black people that were talking about race, you don't want to deal with them because they saw this coming. So we have a reward system that says black people that don't know about race but react to race in the same way that white people do, those people are special. Black people who study black people and can predict that this is going to happen, say, I don't know, they write about the racism of white men for the last 200 years, those people are not popular, right? So we have to reconsider what we actually take to be good race scholarship. Right now, anything just comes out and it's all fluff. Right. We write about race, but we never talk about white people. I'm just confused. So racism exists, but racist white people don't. This is ridiculous.
Right.
Right? So then think about it, we conceptualize history in a world where racist white people existed, but racist white women don't.
Right.
I don't know what these things mean.
Right.
I really don't. I'm not trying to be cheeky. I'm just saying I really don't understand what it means to talk about a history of racism where white women have historically benefited from systems of segregation and lynching, etc., and then get to a point in the 21st century where suddenly white women become extricated from the boundaries of history and geography. I don't know what that means. Yes, ma'am.
Couple of earlier this morning, you talked about backlash when you do the kind of work that you all are doing.
Yes, ma'am.
One, I wonder if you could tell me, what does that look like? What do we want? And then number two, you also talked about isolation. So my question is, how do you all take care of yourselves in doing that?
That's a great question. So to the latter question about isolation, largely my wife. So my wife is an amazing, short, thick black woman. So she gave me two beautiful little black girls. So my wife immensely supports my work. She, and I asked her constantly. I was like, I could have just spent my career writing about white figures. And she never would let me do it. She was like, you do good work. You've kind of beat every merit pool. I went from assistant to full in 6 years. I've had endowed chairs. I've done the merit part. So she really does help me sustain, even though I get the backlash. What the backlash looks like is, going to conferences, giving a paper like this, and having, often, either white women or black feminists boo me for talking about this. I've been booed at conferences. I've been slandered. Somehow my work has been called anti-woman. It's been called all sorts of ridiculous things, even though I'm clearly studying gender, I'm clearly studying women, I'm clearly engaging in historical and evidence-based approach. There's a backlash that, doing work on black men is misogynist, and criticizing feminist theories is, sexist. That's what the backlash looks like. It's not based on a confrontation of the ideas. It's more so based in this person isn't a good fit for different kinds of programs or positions. So, that is what it is. The fact of the matter is I believe that black men are humans. I think that there needs to be scholarship that humanizes them. And I think the lives and the existence of black men matter to black women and black families. Because I come from a southern environment where black men literally work themselves to death by the time they're in their late 50s or 60s, they're broken men. And black women end up spending most of their time along with children, impoverished, and alone, because of the economic conditions that I grew up in. So I take that kind of as the foundation from which I write. And I'm a first-generation student from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Right? My parents had some college, but didn't really finish until after I finished. So I'm the product of a group of working-class Southern black people that they thought as slow as they talk. And I take a certain kind of pride about that. My grandmother was a domestic. She used to bring us things that that she took from white folk because they didn't treat her right. So I think that's more of a humbling experience when you look at, because that was sacrifice, right? My grandmother supported 4 or 5 children, including my father. So that's a kind of sacrifice, and that's why I do the work that I do. because I contextualize the kind of violence that, say, my great-grandfather goes through, still, working fields for white folks up in Jonesboro, Louisiana, or my grandfather who couldn't make money or find jobs, so went to the military. Those kinds of experiences formulate how I study the suffering of black men. And if that's too non-respectable for, kind of the black bourgeois intellectual class, then so be it. I think the problem is that, when you try to study black people, there's a kind of copyright that's put on what you can say. People don't want to know about black boys being raped. They don't want to know about the violence within our homes. They don't want to know that, young black women sometimes end up raping young black women. And unlike some of the theories that we have about black masculinity, I'm not here trying to suggest that there's some cultural defect with black women. I think these things are environmental. And I think that if you grow up in a situation with hypersexual views of black boys, then, you think that you're given, a rite of passage, right? But I'm saying that given the stories that we've analyzed with young black boys, that's not how they reacted to it. They fundamentally changed their sexual lives. And if we're just going to be honest in our own personal lives, right? There's some aspects about our culture and sex, some ideas we have about black men when they're excited with the responsibility that they have to listen to that excitement, that very much borders on non-consensual sex, even within relationships. We have to start having those conversations, right? We have to start having those conversations. And I think that, maybe in time, look, this could be something where, at 37, I'm a full professor and just done. Who knows, right? I'm just blackballed from the academy. Or maybe, some of the stuff that I'm writing one day may stick with some students, and they're like, man, this guy wasn't that crazy. He was actually on something. And, people start citing me, reading me, and, maybe in 10, 20 years, somebody come back and say, yeah, this is the way that we should go. I think that what I find, I guess the thing that I find the most ironic is that white men have already done this work. So like when we talk about Chatterley, Hearn, James Messersmith, when we talk about R.W.S. Connell, they've already done this work on working class white men, right? Where it's just like not all white men are patriarchal, we need empirical studies, we need to do different histories. Messersmith's a criminologist, he's constantly doing this work in relationship to poor white men in crime, or poor men in crime. So I find it somewhat interesting and disheartening that when a black man comes up and says, we can do similar work, and we need to do similar work, it extricates the concepts of manhood from the masculine idea of patriarchy, then somehow there's a backlash to it, right? Again, for using this, I've actually just read all the comment. They've just read one line, right? Connell is clearly supporting the idea that there's multiple masculinities. The other thing is given that I've discovered this piece about Jewish men and boys being raped during the Holocaust, there's just been so much more acceptance from Jewish scholars at the Shoah Foundation, I'm a fellow there, about this kind of sexual violence in history. And it took me, again, like when I figure out that I'm wrong about it. I gave a presentation on the rape of Jewish men during the Holocaust, given some of the transcriptions I found in their own archive. And these people were immensely moved. Women were crying. The men, were saying, listen, we need to recode the index. They're like, where did you find this? This was their reaction, that we need to do a better job of understanding this dynamic during the Holocaust. Given the responses and backlash I've had to introducing black men being raped during slavery and Jim Crow, it actually caught me for a moment. Because I came in thinking, I was going to get this huge backlash for trying to study Jewish men, and these Jewish women, these white Jewish women were coming to me, holding my hand, and was like, thank you so much for doing this work. I knew him, and he never told me this. Mm-hmm. They're like, I knew him, I was his friend. And one of the men, I'll never forget it, she was almost in tears. And she was just like, he's like, you did such graciousness to him in humanizing this part of himself that we never knew about. So I'm in like twilight, I'm like, how does this happen? And then I called one of my mentors, Dr. Lawson, and I told him, I was like, you never guess what happened to me. And he was like, I was in complete shock. Because I'm so used to the pushback from how people react to talking about black men being raped, that it never dawned on me that there was a space where you could talk about this victimization and it's immediately humanized rather than disowned. And it took me a minute, it took me a few hours to wrap my head around it, because they're like, look, we want you to come back and talk to different people, we're going to put you on the website, and I'm just like, So you mean I found 30 stories of male rape. They're ready to do a whole symposium. I try to talk to my own people about how this happens, and I get, well, black men, you're trying to center the conversation on men, you're erasing women, right? This wasn't prevalent, X, Y, and Z, right? So I think that that's part of the backlash, is that we're still dealing with internalization, misandric notions of black males that many black women simply don't want to admit, right? And I actually think that in terms of how we deal with racism and misandry within our culture, this has to be an education system, right? This has to be us understanding what happens if you rape a young black boy. This has to be that you probably shouldn't be having sex with 9 or 12-year-olds, right? Because based on our research, that's when most black boys lose their virginities, basically between 6 and 9, and then we got a cohort that loses between like 9 and 12, right? So yeah, I know it is, right? But people are having sex with little boys, and these are older women. I mean, some of these stories are like 15, 16, 17-year-old women. Some of these stories are like 21, 25, 28-year-old women. So these are women who are utilizing young boys for their own sexual needs, but these boys aren't getting any kind of counseling or access to health care. Right. So then, and the effects, and here's the thing, the etiologies of what happens is it lines up perfectly with what people usually diagnose as hypermasculinity. Problems with conflict resolution, problems with intimacy, at least the birth of one child before the age of 21, intimate partner violence, right? These are the kinds of tests that you usually find with people with early sexual experiences or statutory rape. These match up perfectly with what people are constantly saying black men are hypermasculine, anti masculinities, etc. So we have a history of trauma that we haven't really broached in our communities, and specifically because it's affecting black males and black women are perpetrators. But there's also the problem of men having sex with little boys in our communities that we don't want to talk about. Right? And this is what I'm saying. Like, this is not, I feel some kind of way because most gender theories go for targets and other perpetrators evil. This is a situation where there's a certain view of black male bodies of young boys that just hasn't been undone yet. Right? We haven't addressed it. And we think that it's funny to talk about a young man who's scared of sex, or a young man at the age of 11, 12, 13 that's still a virgin, not understanding that the pressure to have sex in our communities sometimes leads to their sexual exploitation and sexual assault. And then we don't have a very good way of talking about the women who perpetuate this kind of violence. Because we're basically like, oh, well, we should be happy that she gave himself. This is not an adequate response to mental health issues. Right? So we have to do a lot of work, and I'm trying to get this started. But again, we don't have a theory of black female perpetration, even domestic abuse, statutory rape, etc. And we need it. We need to find out why this happens. Right? It could be economic, it could be environmental, it could be cultural. We just need to find out. Right? And we need to write about that and use that to conduct studies of people. Yes,
wait, hold on. Now, Dr. Curry's been going since 8:30 this morning. We literally have about 7 minutes left where we have the room scheduled. So I think we have time, depending on the length of the answer, maybe 2 more questions if we keep time in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as a black woman, I go to Fresno City, and you see a lot of black males, and they don't really know how to, you can say it's rivalry wherever they go, no matter even if it's just walking past. How do you bring about unity without, the conflict? Like, how do you get...
And is it conflict between other men? Or?
It's not even a conflict, it's just more of a, you see them and they nag dog each other, if that makes sense.
Okay.
How would you be able to, instead of, changing their mind to make them seem as brothers instead of enemies, how would you bring about unity? That's my question.
So,
well, it's 18 to maybe 30, early, late 30s.
Wow, that's a big age.
I mean, early 30s.
Are these generally first generation students here? First generation?
City college.
Community college. Fresno City College.
Fresno City College. I mean, you're probably dealing with that. You're probably dealing with all kind of issues. I mean, you're probably ostracized from the primary schools, didn't get a lot of academic reinforcement. You're dealing with issues of depression, social economic status problems. I mean, the kinds of competitions could also be, the perceptions of danger, interpersonal relationships with other black men given their environment. I mean, you would have, I mean, to figure that question out accurately, you literally have to go in and study, right? You have to, because, I mean, off of a guess, you know, if they're in a community college, I would say maybe first generation poverty, socioeconomic status may be an issue. If they're coming from some of the rougher neighborhoods around your city, that may be an issue because they're socialized to fear or at least disconnect from other black males. The way they're treated within the institution can be a problem because if they're not athletes or if they're low performing, there may be other people that invest in them. They may have other issues that would be like, I mean, there's so many different things that could affect that kind of population. You know, it's just kind of guessing to win. I mean, I think when you start talking about unity, it's good to talk about it ideologically, but you also have to give some practicality to it. Right. So if you're going to start talking about unity, there has to be a benefit for young black men in college about that. Are you going to give them peer mentors? Are you going to increase their ability to socially interact with different men and women? Right? What's the peer group look like? So if you're talking about young men from the ages of 18, 21, 22, I mean, what's the availability of them to actual desirable peer relationships? And many times, those peer relationships look like other men that they form, you know, friendships with, or women. So what are the romantic interests looking like? What are the dating availabilities, right? These are all things that matter in young people's social systems. So, you know, yeah. So unity is a big word, a big concept, but I think that it really depends on what you're trying to build. You're trying to build political coalitions. It has to have some practical benefits, right? And part of that practical benefit, I mean, if they're in a city college or something like that, or maybe if they're here, we may be increasing their reference, right? Or getting them to post-baccalaureate programs, graduate programs. If there's an issue, I know the young lady said that there's no black men here today. I mean, maybe it's a peer matching thing. Where, you know, available black men are being socialized or really with women that are no. I mean, that's a question I get all the time. You know, where are the black men? I can't make black men appear. Right? So I mean, any of those things could be. I just don't.
Okay, one more. Hand over there.
Go ahead.
There's one.
All right, so we'll get heard.
I just was thinking, you think of, I see this in my own home at least, there's so much pain and trauma from the pain, since in general, even for, you know, even though Caroline is based on gender-based crimes, it's hard for anybody to get, you know, some kind of justice from that alone. So I think a reason why, perhaps a reason why, you know, men are silenced in this, you know, black men are silenced in this, silence is because everybody's trying to speak up for each other. And everybody wants to be, you know, prove that they suffered more than the other.
Yeah.
You know, and so how do you, I mean, I'm sure you don't know the answer, but, you know, how do you reconcile every, you know,
Well, I just don't see a person, I mean, I don't have any politics.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it means to be like, she's a victim of rape, but he's not because he's a man. I don't get it.
I'm not.
You know, no, I don't mean you are, but that's how that conversations are, right? The conversations are, well, if we accept the women are raped, we somehow can't accept the men are raped. Because then that makes women perpetrators and they're only seen as victims. That just seems ridiculous, right? It seems ridiculous because what I see are two victims. And I research men and I know the prevalence of women, so I have sympathies for both. And I'll be very honest with you, I had this huge fight on Facebook around Nate Park, right? When they were making arguments about, oh, he's a rapist, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, listen, we're not there. So we don't know if it's real, we don't know if it's false, we don't know the data, we don't know any of that. And I was like, what I tell you that I have a problem with is the idea that we should now read all black men in these situations, because the argument just wasn't about him. It was about Nate Park, it was about all black men like him. And what ends up happening is you get this demonization of black men having sex, where all possible sex becomes rape. And I'm being very serious. So what ends up happening is you have articles by, I think Trevor Lindsay wrote an article about how black men that ran trains on women were rapists. But that doesn't take into account how lower class black women or working class black women look at sexual activity. The same, like, these are completely different things, right? We work from a bourgeois notion that says these people are always victims, these people didn't have any agency, hence these people were always perpetrators and had hyper agents, right? And that's not an accurate way to look at it. and the problem I had is I was saying, so are black academics now the moral arbitrators of people's sexuality? Right, so we're about sex positivity,
Right.
but God forbid if a woman wants to have a threesome or orgy.
Man.
That's rape. We're about sex positivity, but God forbid, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And then we come back and it's like, well, no, that had to be codes of power. We don't know the dynamics of that. And what it ends up happening, and this is what's analogous to the Nick Parker situation, is we say that any practice of those kinds of sexual activities becomes coercive and rape in and of itself. The reason that matters is because in that world, heterosexual black men never could be victims of any heterosexual sex. Because from that paradigm, heterosexual men in having sex always have power. And that's just not always the case. A lot of the rapes that we find with young males usually happens because of emotional manipulation or while they're asleep or somehow disabled. So it is not uncommon to get reports of rape where men wake up being made to penetrate them. This happens all the time. It even happens in the course of relationships. We all know that this stuff kind of happens, right? So, it's something that we have to start talking about. And because we don't have a very rich notion of what male sexual assault and rape looks like, and this is what I'm saying, we normalize it in our communities. Because, I mean, think about how we would treat a man if he's like, well, you know, look, I woke up and my girlfriend made me penetrate her and I didn't want to do it. What kind of stereotypes would you place on that?
Right.
Right? How would he be emasculated or ridiculed? And people are going to say, oh, it's patriarchy. Yeah, but there's also a view there where women are perpetrators. But imagine if that would have happened to a woman. Where she wakes up and her boyfriend's, right? We have to undo this, right? Because that's not how Title IX is written, one. And two, there's a need for nuance and complexity in these experiences that I don't think are getting treated. And I think that's what lends to the fact that you get all these people yelling, I suffer more, I suffer more. Because there's a view that if you're a victim, you have to yell that you're a victim out of everybody else to be recognized. I'm sorry?
So you kind of do.
Yeah.
Have to yell.
Well, yes.
That's the problem with the general Greek culture, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
In general, even for whoever, it's going to be hard to get recognition.
Right, it is hard to get recognition, but notice that recognition often doesn't serve the victims if they're trying to get recognition. And that's the point of it, right?
Oh, yeah,
so you'll have blog after blog about rape culture. You'll have blog after blog about Nat Parker and the white woman that he raped. And then black women are using this as like, oh, black men are toxic masculine. This wasn't a black woman. This wasn't a situation where there's a rapist in your community. This is a caricature that you're utilizing to extend to other black men. Right. And that's the problem that I have with the analysis. That, I mean, look, the DOJ came out with a report, it did a 10-year study of rape. And from, I think it was 2003 to 2013. And the average number of rapes are roughly 10,000 for women and around 7,000 for men. It's like 6,700. That's 6,700 rapes of men on college campuses that no one speaks about. And I brought up the case, I was like, one of the men testified that the woman in the case simply, performed oral sex without consent. I was like, given the way the law's written, that could be a form of rape now. I was like, so how do we understand this complexity? I'm like, oh no, that's ridiculous. I was like, you see, that's what I'm talking about. You've reconstructed a narrative of how this event happened that doesn't give credence to anybody's experience except for the white woman who no longer is there to testify on her own behalf. Right. And that means that her pain and suffering is being utilized by people other than herself to get recognition for a problem that other people are not even doing. Right? We need to talk about victims. If women are raped on college campuses, we need to treat and prosecute that incident, that violation. Right? We don't need people in Title IX offices making general claims that all men are rapists. Because as we know, while it does affect white men, it disproportionately will affect black and brown. Right? Yes, ma'am, last question.
Hi, I'm Sierra. I am on the board, the presidential board for African Black Coalition, and on the executive board of Black Students United. And I want to thank you for coming out because I'm an Africana Studies major, and so I definitely appreciate your presence here.
Oh, thank you.
As well as, but my question is, because I'm a part of many organizations and support of like the Greek Life on Campus and Onyx and various organizations, sometimes I am met with that words that people have used with me, not misandrous. What's the word? Huh? Misandrous? comment, I ain't gonna lie, of calling Onyx a He-Man woman head club. Joking. But.
Okay.
Several times.
Huh?
Several times, repeatedly over years.
So they called you a Sanders?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the word I was looking for. Okay. But I've been supporting black men. I consider myself a black womanist. And
It almost sounds like a white liberal confession, but go ahead. I got black friends. I support black men. I'm picking with you.
But my question is, as intellectuals like yourself and others develop a language for black men and black studies, how do educated black women like myself and start to change our ways in thinking? Because I've taken Dr. Johnson's Black Masculinity class, and it's completely opened my eyes to various things that I've been doing as far as communicating with black males, and I am constantly working towards
He's turning to you.
changing
like,
my position, because I know that I can be hurtful by the things I say to black males, and even though those are not my intentions. So I guess my overall question is,
it's like my wife after we had an argument. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but it had to be said.
Yeah, that's me. So my question is, how do, especially black college students, when we have a lot of discussions privately, and when engaging in these discussions, how do we look at both sides of the story?
Well, I think that's the first thing. I mean, when you interact with black men and black women, and I say this because I'm married to a black woman, so doing this work is never done from the position where there's an antagonism. Right? My wife and I disagree adamantly about some personal experiences. Because I tell her, I was like, listen, there was a period of time where, when I was 17, I was in People magazine, right? And I was dating a woman from Baton Rouge, and I thought I was special. Right? 17 People magazine, so yeah, And she didn't think anything of it. And I mean, for a long time in undergrad, I had the hardest time. I used to write for my newspapers, just like going off of white people. I had the hardest time dating a black woman, right? White women would literally follow me around because they were like, oh, you're in the paper, you're like a 4.0 student, X, Y, and Z. And to me, that was really hurtful, right? Because I was like, I don't get it. Like, I'm talking about you. I want to date her. Why are you here, right? This is not what I'm going after. And for young black men, it was very hurtful, right? It was disappointing. At certain points I was angry, right? Because I was like, why are black women not feeling me, etc. But then I had to take a step back. It was like, but there's so few black men that are high academic achievers that black women have been, around as peers. Part of that's the issue. They read it as effeminate, right? They didn't see it the same way. So I had to take a step back and say, what are the conditions that are allowing them to treat me that way? Now, would any 19-year-old boy do that? Probably not, right? But that moment is how we can choose how to understand each other, right? Like I could have said, fine, I hate black women, I'm dating a white girl, right? Or I'm dating a Latina, right? But I didn't do that, one, because I wanted a black family, but two, because it takes a certain kind of graciousness. Black men and black women are not going to always agree, right? We have different experiences. My wife and I still disagree about some stuff, right? And she's like, black men never thought I was attractive. I'm like, that's because we're in the north. She goes to the south, it's only everybody, right? And I tell her, I was like, we have to. But despite that disagreement, I mean, it's times when we're arguing. I was like, okay, what's the facts? What's the facts? So we're arguing about how people treat us. What's the facts of the matter, right? And then when we do that, okay, so we understand why we feel different ways about it. We don't have to always agree, but if we only have a space in the university where women get to vent their interpersonal problems with black men, and hold all black men accountable for that, and black men who suffer the same traumas and isolations and disappointment are always dealing with the insult without a space to communicate their issues with black women, be it early sexual abuse or trauma or verbal abuse or psychological abuse or whatever the case may be, then that only furthers the resentment, right? That furthers the disengagement. It's very difficult for a black man to go through his whole life being either abused or verbally abused and downgraded by a black woman, and then at the end of it to be like, oh, you should marry a black woman. Right. That's not how the world works, right? So we have to hear both sides. Are black women going to be frustrated by different kinds of marginalizations in society? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there sexism and misogyny that works against our women? Absolutely. Do some of our black men hold some of those ideas? Absolutely. Right? But does that mean that you become the victim par excellence? No. Does that mean that black men have also experienced misandry and negative stereotypes from black women? Yes. Does it mean that black women have abused emotionally or physically black men? Yes. Right. The victimization card could be played by both parties. So that means that in order for you to deal with that in your personal relationship, you have to withstand being called out by black men by how you make them feel. The same way that you have to be open to say, okay, well, if you're making me feel this way and you make me feel that way, then we're going to have to talk about it. Right. Do we have a stake in our friendship or do we have a stake in the relationship? And that's in the part, like, that just may not be your personality. You're like, maybe I just hate black men. That's cool. You want to be an anti-black misandrist? Go for it. Just stay away from black men. Right? Don't date you a white boy or a Latino or something. But if you have an investment in your own people, right? And I experienced this with my wife. My wife hated me when she married. My wife actually hated me. She pulled the Bible out. Like, this is how bad it was, right? And I was like, what are you doing with that? Like, you think the words would jump and attack me? Make an argument, right? Like, that's how I engaged my wife when we first met, right? Because she kept saying these things, and I was like, prove it, right? And, you know, so we just kept talking to each other. And inevitably, we fell in love and had 2 babies. It's from Arkansas. But the point is, there was a moment where we tried to understand each other, right? She was mad. She's like, you're trying to get me to think like you think. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to get you to think. Right? I'm just trying to get you. No, I'm serious because it was a period of time when we were in grad school, and I was a little more advanced than her because she came in as a master's student. I was already like PhD. I finished my PhD extremely fast. So I was already doing that. So I was like, oh, if you want to be friends or if you want to take this to another level, you got to be an independent woman and a thinker, right? I was like, and I told her, I was like, see, the power, because I was constantly get on her, like, because I was always reading like black women. I was like, look, the power of black women isn't silence. Like, the power of black women is to be able to know more than men and build a civilization from. So I was like, and I told her, I was like, so if you, and she was gonna have natural hair. That's what I really. She was growing natural hair. So no, but see, this is what I'm saying. Like, to understand what black women are and what they've done isn't a romanticization of what black women are as like black girl magic or shit like that. To appreciate black women is to understand the role that black women have historically played in supporting black people. And the role that black women have historically played is black women have always been able to say, look, let's pump our brakes here. Right? This is a fight, but this isn't necessarily the fight we need to take here. Or if we were engaged in this fight, we got to make sure we survive. Right? So we have a lot to learn from how black women do things. The problem is, what we end up doing in the academy is that's the only piece of the puzzle that we value that. So just like, I think about the words of Megan Williams. Megan Williams, who was Robert F. Williams' wife, said before she met Robert, she was cool with segregation. She was like, white people over there, black people over here. But she started dating a boy that thought he could be president. So he started the militant and armed civil rights movement because he believed that we had to push the boundaries of history. And she said he radicalized her. And she became radicalized and taught students, taught children how to defend themselves. And then he birthed the idea for the Republic of Africa and black women organized and stabilized the community. You see, when you learn about black people, you learn a lot of cool shit. Right? And that's what I mean. But see, that becomes the lens by which I interpreted my wife. Because I was like, women have to be smart as black women. Right? They have to be smart as black women. Because black women they teach black children. They teach black community. That's just the reality. And that's why I'm always trying to lecture the sisters about black male studies. Because you outnumber us in the academy. You get almost 70% of our degrees. This is not an argument by which black men have to somehow denigrate black women. It's trying to get black women to understand the damage they're doing to black men and black men to lead that part of the re-education. Right? If we're going to survive as a community, we can't have misogyny or misandry. Right? Because both are equally as dangerous, and often misandric stereotypes lead to black men to be killed. So we have to understand how the mutual understanding of the dynamics of violence in our community affect both people. Right? So that's what I would say. I would say that, look, it's personal work, but look, isn't this, it's the same, I think the part that kind of nudges black women is they've never had to do this kind of adjustment there. You see, because history's kind of been written on the side that, like, well, look, we got our bell hooks, we got our Patricia Hill Collins, we get our Kimberly Crenshaw, we built up. Like, you can't say shit to us. Right? And then you get these black men who are now saying, hold up, here's how these theories exclude us. Here's how we're doing worse than you. here's how you got to be compassionate to that situation. You may be upset because there's not enough black men for you. We're mad because there's not enough black men, right? These are two different experiences. And I've been in conferences where black women are like, black women are marrying, or black men are marrying white women. I was like, that's bullshit. Can we please get off of this? You know, it's because it's not true, but that's the reaction, right? I mean, and let's be honest. I mean, you're young, you're trying to date, you're trying to find different things. You may not be heterosexual, but I'm saying hypothetically, assuming you are, right? That's frustrating, right? Because when you're that age, you're like, well, what about me? Right? That's how we think at this age. What about me? What about my needs? Who's focused on me? Why don't I feel special? Why don't I have a man that does X, Y, Z? She got one and she ain't even cute. Right? Like, this is how we think at this age. Right? So it becomes very easy, and see, this is the problem I have with how we do gender. It becomes very easy to hold that kind of antipathy and anger and turn it to something else. Like if I wanted to take black men and just say, here's why you should hate black women, it becomes very easy to do that. It becomes easy to be a Tommy Sotomayor. Right? It becomes easy to do it. No, it's easy to be a for Harriet. Don't march for Eric Garner because they kill us all.
Right.
It's easy to be one of those people. It's not easy to be a black intellectual that's for black people, that says black men, because you understand that to cultivate black men and to solve the problems of black men, you have to talk about black families, black mothers, black communities, etc. Right. That's not easy, right? Because it's about fighting against black feminists on some issues, but then trying to show black women, here's how this actually is a positive message about us. It's about telling black men to be proud of who you are, but don't overlook the faults so you don't go into a pathological existence. That's difficult. Right? What's easy is just like hate each other and don't worry about the consequences. That destroys community. And that's why I'm saying that if you just look at where that message is coming from, if you listen to the people who make $40,000 or $50,000 to come talk to you and tell you about that message, ask yourselves how have they proven themselves in terms of building up community. So if you doubt me, look at my black wife, look at my two little black girls, look at how they're reified. Look at how they're reflected in my work. Look at how they're reflected in the sentiment and care about decreasing violence overall.
Right.
Now, you can still disagree with me. You can think that I'm clear wrong. But ask, how am I trying to reach out to my community? When you look at these other people, what avenues do they have in perpetuating community? They don't even get along with the men, if they're heterosexual, that look like them.
Right.
If they're not heterosexual, they don't get along with the women that look like them.
Right.
So then what is it about this kind of ideology that seems to be so antisocial in a world where they're claiming to build coalition and community? Right? That's what I'm saying. Hold theories to the fire. Right? If you think that there's something I said that doesn't ring with you, or you think is anti-woman or anti-homosexual or something, test me on it. Right? But don't let people constantly get away with giving you theories that only benefit and line their pockets. And that your university brings in because they've been approved by white folks. Right? I'm definitely serious. I'm definitely serious. When you invite these people, look at who they're associated with. When you start looking at these issues about my sister's keeper and my brother's keeper and where these arguments come from, that's why Tim Wise is on the same board with Kimberly Crenshaw. How are these theories aligned? That's not to say that these theories, that they don't have a right to say what they want to say, but what are the associations between this type of investment that white people have in these kinds of theories? Right? Why have this become the dominant language of how we talk about things? There's no laws that are passed based on intersectionality. It hasn't affected how policy is. It spurred a whole bunch of people talking about it in the academy. But what law do you know where people are like, law? It's been around since 1989. That's almost, what, 30 years? Right? 27 years, 28 years? It hasn't affected law and policy. So then why are we valuing a hashtag so deep? Man. Nobody knows how the shit works.
Thank you.
No, I'm serious. Like, they literally don't. They keep saying that it works this way, or it's not a method, it's an attitude. What is that? Have an intersectional attitude towards intersectionality? That sounds kind of...
That sounds backwards.
Yeah, that's something, right? That's not saying that we shouldn't pay attention to gender or sexuality, etc. But can I get a historical analysis? Can I get an empirical study?
Right.
Can I verify something? That's what we should be asking ourselves about these types of issues. So the long way of answering that question is, be open to the criticism, push back where you think you need to push back, and accept that on some issues you simply just will not agree. But that doesn't mean that you have to make or break a relationship, a friendship, or a romantic relationship just because you don't see things the same, right? I mean, it's going to take both sides, right? I mean, I'm married, so, I'm always opposing them. But, black men can't be wrong about it. So I would just say stay open and at least look into some of the ways you may be enforcing such stereotypes.
Give Dr. Curry real quick, housekeeping business. I have no idea how much food is left, but I do hope some of you will take advantage of whatever may be there. Secondly, there was supposed to be no food in here. I'm just going to ask those who may have brought something in, I'm not pointing any fingers, pick up your mess, please take it outside. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnson.